Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
And welcome to the Terrible Podcast, special edition of the Terrible Podcast. It is the 2021 draft season, and as Dave Bryan and I talked about on a recent episode of the podcast, we wanted to do a draft roundtable, so it wasn't just Dave and I yapping ourselves the last couple of weeks here. We wanted to invite the whole Depot crew on, guys that have worked so hard this draft season to provide some awesome content, player profiles, mock drafts, etc. And so we wanted an opportunity to really talk to those guys. And so you, more importantly, could listen and hear from those guys and get their opinions on some of the top prospects and just prospects in general in the 2021 NFL draft. So to start things off, I just want to go down the line here and kind of let everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll get into draft talk. So we'll start here with Josh Carney. Josh has been with us for a long time now. Thanks for being back on the show, Josh.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I went back and looked. This will be my sixth draft with you guys.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, doesn't feel like that long, but I went back today and looked, and just happy to be back on here and continue to do work with you guys.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Somebody who was just here brand new, one of the newest members of Steelers Depot is Daniel Kitchen. Daniel, thanks for being here, and thanks for joining the team.
Glad to be here. It's been a great couple of weeks that I've been with Steelers Depot, but I've been able to read everybody's work through editing a lot of it, and it's a lot of talented people here, a lot of great opinions, and I'm very happy to be here with you guys talking draft.
I believe maybe the only actual football player on this Zoom call is Owen Straley. He's been with us for a couple of years now, defensive back, secondary, I think, expert. Owen, thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you. Happy to be on the podcast for the first time. It's my second draft season with you guys, and can't say enough about the good work everyone here does.
And then Jonathan is pretty new to us. You've been here for, a couple months now, but I think just done outstanding work. So thank you for talking with us, Jonathan.
Absolutely. No, I've been a long-time listener for the past 5-6 years, always chime in every week to listen to Steelers Terrible Podcast. So it's a great opportunity to contribute in draft profiles and just be a part of the team.
Tom Mead's voice may be familiar. I know he subbed in on a couple episodes of the podcast before when I was at the Senior Bowl. Tom, thanks for being back on.
Thanks, Alex. Happy to be here. This is my third draft with the team, and this is my favorite part of the season. We get to do a lot of fun stuff all year, but watching the players and getting ready for the draft is the best part.
Yep, ours as well. And then finally, last but not least, Tyler Wise, who's also done draft profiles for us, done a fantastic job. Tyler, thanks for being on.
Thanks, Alex. Also, happy to be here. This was always kind of my draw to Steelers Depot when I was younger too, was, the draft process and getting to learn all the guys. So to be part of it this year is very cool.
All right, so we'll jump right in here, Dave. I mean, I don't know exactly what direction you wanted this thing to start. I have a couple of questions, but if you want to have any questions or a way to lead this thing off, feel free to.
Yeah, somebody's cutting onions in my house, I think. All these talented guys that we've been able to assemble here. Boy, Alex and I are so blessed to have, just the amount of work that these guys, first and foremost, that they have put out, well over 200 draft profiles on the site. And I think by the time we wrap up, by the time the draft gets started, we're going to be knocking on the 250 door there, I think, more than anything. So kudos to you guys from myself and Alex to start with here. Alex, I'll let you start taking this in. I think less of me and less of you may be better for this podcast, and let these guys shine and just kind of lead the parade here.
Yeah, well, the first thing that came to my mind in terms of things I wanted to get your opinion on, and I agree, I think Dave and I should talk less as we talk enough as it is just, because you guys have done so many profiles, you guys have done the majority of them, just some of the favorite prospects you guys have come across just in general, but then more specifically, guys you think that you like that would fit really well in Pittsburgh. So, Jonathan, I'll start with you. Just who are some prospects that you've watched and done profiles on that you think would be just a really good fit in Pittsburgh? Not necessarily for the first round, but just at any point in this draft.
Absolutely. So I would go first by looking at some of the prospects that I like to watch in general. So I have to say, starting draft profiling and looking at the draft, I've been really drawn to the wide receiver position ever since I've looked into it or started doing it. As well as kind of taking after Dave in the edge rusher department as well, too. So those are two positions that I feel gravitated toward. In terms of prospects that I've been interested in, One would be one of my first profiles I wrote up was De'Ami Brown from North Carolina, just this speedster that can take the top off the defense, but has also been a very good route runner, just being able to work short, intermediate, and obviously deep down the field. I also like Seth Williams, big body, contested catch guy, can go up on the top of the rim and go over top the defensive backs and be able to make plays that way. Another guy that I did not have the opportunity to profile, but was done very, very well by another member of our crew was Tamori and Terry from Florida State. I think that he is a guy that obviously dealt with a lot of injuries and issues with the whole Florida State team and is kind of being overlooked at this point in time as a guy that is just a very dynamic, explosive, deep threat receiver that has a lot of potential, almost Martavius Bryant-esque, the way he plays the game. And he is going to be a guy that obviously can make an impact should he go to an offense that utilizes his abilities.
I'm glad you mentioned Seth Williams. Ike Hilliard was at the Auburn Pro Day. I think the only Pro Day we know that Hilliard was at. They, of course, have Anthony Schwartz, but also you can't forget about Seth Williams. So I think that's good that you mentioned that. Tom, same question to you. Just favorite prospects you've either watched or profiled or both that you think would be really good fits in Pittsburgh?
Oh, this draft class has been really interesting. I think there are a lot of guys that will fit nicely. If you're looking at the edge position, Joe Tryon from Washington, I think he looks like a Steeler size-wise. He plays aggressively, and he took this year off, so he might not be on their radar so much. But I liked him. Another guy later in the draft is William Bradley King from Baylor. He's got pretty much the same measurables as Alex Highsmith. His 10-yard splits are right there with the top guys in this draft. He might be a guy that can get late and provide that backup role. And one other guy, Richie Grant from Central Florida. He plays in the mold of Mike Hilton and could be a good replacement there. He's very aggressive against the run. He could play the deep safety. He could play in the slot consistently. I think he'd be a really good fit on day two.
Oh, and I saw you nodding your head whenever Tom mentioned Richie Grant. I know you've probably watched a lot of DBs in this process. Do you agree with that assessment with Grant, and then any other DBs that you think would be really good fits in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, no, 100% on Grant. I was watching Aaron Robinson from UCF for a profile on him, and Grant was really sticking out, even though I wasn't as up on Robinson as I maybe thought I would be. As for other corners, I think you just got to look towards different guys, whether they be slot or outside, because Cam Sutton can really play either. So I guess if we were going to go outside, two guys I really have my eye on for second, third round would be Paulson Adebo from Stanford and Kelvin Joseph from Kentucky. Two guys with that longer mold, speed to carry vertically, can play both press and off man, and both have enough physicality where you think they can play against the run or at least hold up once they add a little strength at an NFL program. And then as for slot guys, a guy that you actually put me onto, Alex, Elijah Molden, really enjoyed his film. Physical player in that Mike Hilton mold. It doesn't necessarily have the ideal long speed, but I think you can probably disguise him in different ways, more underneath shallow zones, probably not too much over the top. And then another guy would be Javon Holland, who also caught my eye from Oregon. Kind of a guy who can play center field, free safety, can come up and play the slot, he can do a lot of different things. So I think bring him to Pittsburgh, he could play the slot as a rookie before maybe eventually succeeding Edmonds on the outside and giving you a really strong safety tackle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned just the type of corners the Steelers look for on the outside. Do you think James Pierre, Justin Lane, they're kind of gravitating towards guys that are bigger and longer? Daniel, again, same question to you. It can be any position. What guys have you watched that you or profile that you think would look really good and make sense in Pittsburgh?
Well, the running back class, I know it's Naji Harris, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams are the three that everyone keeps saying which one's going to start for Pittsburgh, but I almost wish the Steelers would double up and take two of them in the draft because there's just so many that I really like. Kenneth Gainwell reminds me of Le'Veon Bell, to be quite frank. I know it's a lofty comparison, but I think he's a do-it-all back that can be found in the third round. You have a power back like Ramondre Stevenson, who's not a liability in as a pass catcher either. That would be, if the Steelers didn't have to spend an early pick on one, that'd be an early day 3 pick that I think would just be phenomenal for them. Then you've got other guys like Trey Sermon, Kylan Hill that aren't getting the buzz because of how good this class is. But these guys all have some modicum of starting upside in there. I'm looking down just a list just to go over all of them. Chuba Hubbard, he could go in the 6th or 7th round. I was labeling this guy as a sleeper first round pick as recent as a couple months ago. I know there's been classes at running back that have been better, but the class the Steelers have to pick from this year is almost the perfect intersection of need and opportunity right here for them to find at least one starter. And again, if they want to spend a second pick on a running back, I wouldn't be against it in this draft.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Stevenson, the combination of size and quickness is really impressive. Josh, I think you did the profile on Stevenson. Did you come away with a similar opinion on him?
Yeah, I mean, I love big backs with great feet, and that's what he has. I mean, there was a clip, I think it was against Tulsa, where he just danced in the hole, and it gave me flashbacks of Jerome Bettis. If the Steelers want to wait on a running back, early day 3, I think he can be had in the 4th round. I would be perfectly fine with Stevenson.
Any other prospects, Josh? I know you've watched a ton this year that you think really fit the mold in Pittsburgh well.
Yeah, the one guy I keep coming back to, and he seems to be overlooked, is Divine Diablo from Virginia Tech. I know that at his pro day, he was working at doing some linebacker drills, but he's, I want to say, 6'4", 220. I think he ran a 4.45, had just an awesome pro day. He feels like that hybrid linebacker safety combination. There was one clip I had in his profile against Clemson where he was near the line of scrimmage, turned and ran 40 yards to break up a pass in center field. And he feels like a guy that can be a terrific run defender. He can blitz for you, and he can play in coverage. Another guy I wanted to mention was Tommy Tremble. I know you did the profile on him, but every time I watch him when he blocks, I remember the clip of Rob Gronkowski throwing the guy out of the club. And that's what I see with Tremble as a blocking tight end. He may not be the best receiving tight end, but, man, he can block, and I think he'd be a significant asset for the Steelers. One other guy I wanted to mention, and I really appreciate Jonathan bringing up Tamorian Terry, but, yeah, I really get Martavius Bryant vibes. He's fantastic after the catch, really good deep threat. Not much else to his game, especially with a route tree like that, but, man, he's fun. He just has to get the red flags off the field cleaned up.
Tyler, any thoughts on the guys we've talked about or any new prospects you think should be thrown in the mix?
Yeah, so I'll ring Tamorian Terry's bell as well. I mean, he's kind of was my sleeper guy, and I was a little upset when Tom jumped on his profile so quickly.
It's competitive.
I was like, this is a guy I can sneak in towards the end, and I think it was like one of the first few weeks we were doing him, it was already gone. But yeah, I mean, he's awesome to watch. I mean, what I love about him too, he actually has some nasty in his game in terms of blocking, and he also has some gunner work as well on special teams, which is obviously when you're a back end guy, especially on the Steelers with how deep their roster is right now there. That's what you're going to need to make that back end of the roster. So Terry's definitely my guy, late rounds. If they do end up taking one like they normally do in the draft, that's definitely my guy to look out for. Guys that I did draft profiles on that I really like, obviously, I mean, Trey Sermon. I feel like he's kind of thrown in the trash lot by most of the Twitter fans on for the Steelers Nation here. But, if it's not Javonte Williams or Harris, they kind of don't like him. But Sermon's my guy. I mean, for best value wise, I mean, if he drops to round 3, I mean, I would jump all over him. Definitely fits, the Steelers mold there. Otherwise, I mean, you guys took most of my people here, but one guy I will say that wasn't mentioned yet was actually Ellerson Smith, who I know the Steelers had some sort of contact with. 6'6", I think he jumped through the roof with like a 41-inch vertical, something like that. Also had a decent 3-cone and everything like that as well. So, I mean, he would be definitely a guy that, probably round 4, you're probably looking to grab him before that massive gap between that last 4th round pick and the 6th round pick. For the Steelers.
Pittsburgh showing interest in both Northern Iowa guys, Ellerson Smith and Spencer Brown, the big offensive tackle. Dave, I know, speaking of guys, that's kind of, I think, one of your guys. So are there other players that you think really fit the Steelers mold to a T?
Yeah, I mentioned I think one of those two Northern Iowa kids are going to end up Steelers, either Brown, the tackle, or Smith there as well too. I think a lot of the guys covered a lot of the people. Look, Dax Milne is one guy that when I first turned the tape on not too long after the season ended, I wanted to go check out the BYU quarterback, and Dax Milne kept showing up on tape. Look, he's not going to impress people with the athleticism, but he is a very, very. Which one of you guys did the profile on him?
That was me. I did.
Okay, so you would agree that he's a great route runner. He's not going to run away from a lot of people, but he's very, very sound when it comes to route running. I don't know obviously where he's going. He's going to be a late round guy, maybe even possibly undrafted. I think I'll be surprised if he goes undrafted there. But if you want to talk about guys at the back end of this draft, the guys that people probably don't know too terribly much about, I think Dax Milne fits in that category there. And Tommy Tremble, I was waiting for one of you guys to get to Tommy Tremble there. You know how I am with edge rushers, pulling guards, and tight ends. I just love breaking those three positions down. And I finally got around to doing a deep dive on Tommy Tremble, and there is a bit of that George Kittle there. Now I dare say that he is George Kittle because look, I remember going back through some of that tape of George Kittle just recently from his college days, and throwing a lot of people out. I mean, just viciously throwing people out of the club. Tommy Tremble has a little bit of that. He's not as violent, I don't think, but he does have that same degree of ability. They moved him around in that Notre Dame offense, a lot of H-back. Heck, they even put him, I think, at fullback a little bit as well, too. The thing, and it's not his fault, much like it wasn't George Kittle's fault back during his college career. They just didn't use him, and he was bookended by the tight end that was drafted. Who was the Notre Dame tight end drafted by the Bears?
Cole Kmet.
Right, Kmet, and then they have an up and coming tight end that they on the other end they started trying to get on the field. If you look at his brief target file over the last 2 years, there's not a lot there, but he did have the depth of target and he did have the catches down the field. You know how big I am on those two stats. And I think he is, if you look at tight end numbers, tight end 1, 2, 3, he's probably not going to be there on people's list. But I think he's comfortably tight end 4 or 5 at a minimum. And boy, what a steal I think a team's going to get with him in the 4th round or so.
Yeah, remember Tremble, he's only 21 years old, only played 2 years for Notre Dame, so I think his best football's still ahead of him. Just joining us, by the way, is Scott Pavel, who's been with us for, I think, a year or two now, and just does the Steelers Big Board, which is out on Tuesday. Incredible work, some of the best draft information that you're going to find. So, Scott, first introduce yourself, and then I was going to ask you the question I've been asking these guys is, in just your research and profiles and watching the prospects in 2021, what guys do you think really kind of feel like they're almost destined to be a Pittsburgh Steeler? What guys fit really well in Pittsburgh?
Well, yeah. Hi guys. I'm Scott. The loudmouth, long-winded hack. Honestly, I mean, the easy answer is Naji Harris.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, it was Amari Samuel Jr.
Ahsante Samuel Jr.?
Ahsante Samuel Jr. He has that. I mean, he has the family connection. He's got the sort of quick movement skills that Tomlin likes. He's really versatile, and he plays with a sort of classy ferocity that I think would appeal. And who was it that I just put up today? The special teams demon out of Boise State.
Avery Williams.
Avery Williams, yeah. He has a real Mike Hilton vibe, and if the Steelers have gotten used to him, that makes a lot of sense.
He is a very much a jack of all trades kind of guy, and I think Danny Smith was at that pro day as well too. Yeah. They even worked that kid out, I think, a little bit at running back as well too, and I think he returned, what was it, 4 punts or something like that, I think, for a touchdown, if that's the kid I'm thinking about there. But yeah. There, you really get a vibe, and I think Alex, we talked to him, or we talked to him on the pro day circuit there and all. You really do get a good vibe out of that kid. It's maybe a late 6th, 7th round. Heck, maybe, who knows if he goes undrafted, but you could definitely see him in the Steelers uniform, as well as Alex, who was the Houston linebacker that really impressed us, a special teams demon as well.
Grant Stewart.
Yeah, that is another kid. You want to talk about someone that's not going to make a lot of commotion. Heck, we'll see if he gets drafted. But a late round guy that, boy, you can't have enough of those guys at the back end of your roster.
I feel like I'm sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
I just did the write up on Williams earlier today. I said, he looks at the people who are off the charts and he laughs in scorn. They had 7 games this year, Dave. 7 games. He had 2 punt returns for a touchdown, 2 kick returns for a touchdown, and two blocked punts that were both touchdowns. He only returned one of them. I mean, it's crazy that numbers like that just don't exist.
Yeah, really impressive guy. It's going to help you on special teams in a ton of ways. Dave, you mentioned the Houston guy. I think you could throw a dart at any of these Houston prospects and find someone that fits, whether that's Marquez Stevenson or Braylon Jones. How about Peyton Turner? Peyton Turner, the edge,
what a guy.
Might be one of the most underrated guys and a really good personality. Ross McCorkle got the chance to interview him. So I think those guys fit. And then I'll just throw out 2 other names as well in Robert Hainsey from Notre Dame with that classic kind of Steelers tough guy, and Ardarius Washington, the corner safety slot guy out of TCU, could be, I think, a Mike Hilton replacement.
I think who was Tyler? Tyler was on the Houston wide receiver a while ago. Were you not, Tyler? Did Tyler leave us?
Tyler, you there?
He's on mute, I think.
Oh, okay.
My apologies. We're back.
Sorry.
Talk a little bit about that. I mean, you've been on the Houston receiver for a while.
Yeah, so Marquez definitely. I mean, he's going to be your deep threat guy. I don't think he ran as well as a lot we're expecting. I want to say he was actually low 4.4s, which I mean, still super fast. But I mean, I think a lot of people were expecting. I think he might have been touting himself. You know how that goes, but I think he was touting himself about like 4.3s and things, which would have definitely jumped off the page. A lot of people are comparing to Mike Wallace. Probably not going to be Mike Wallace. just to throw it out there, but I mean, he's definitely, you see where he's definitely going to win. He had a ton of slot fades. He's not going to be a guy who can go up and get the ball much. And he's going to have to win off the one move or just flying by people. The other way, I mean, they gave him the ball a ton on, jet sweeps and stuff like that, which depending on how Canada, offense goes, that obviously fit in that way as well. But at the same time, because I watched his tape and then I watched Schwartz tape, because I was like, all right, so let's see what we can get between the two. Definitely going with Marquez Stevenson over there. And I mean, hopefully you can get him. I mean, people are saying, 3rd, 4th for Schwartz. I think that's obviously very inflated, but Stevenson's probably going to be a late round, maybe even undrafted free agent guy. So definitely go with him.
Hey, and shout out to Miners as well too. People are going to say, why didn't you mention? I mean, Miners obviously has been one of my favorites right from the get go there. So it goes without saying that you could see him in a Steelers uniform. And I was late to the party with Hainsey, but boy, I mean, since Alex brought him up a couple of podcast shows ago, and you research into that, you look what he did at the center position at the Senior Bowl, man. If you were looking for a center around round 4, possibly, I guess even round 5. I don't like to get too much into where, some of these guys are going to go. That would be the guy. I mean, he has Steeler written all over him. Captain, obviously from Pittsburgh. Center, he's going to have to kick inside at the NFL level. He's just not going to make it on the outside as a tackle. A guy that can, in a pinch, break glass in case of emergency, play all 5 positions on the offensive line for you as well, too.
All right, I think it's a pretty good rundown of the guys that we think would fit well in Pittsburgh. Dave, I knew you wanted to talk about Gil Brandt came out with his new top 100 ranking, which I think is always insightful. We kind of lean on that just to get a gauge of kind of where he's thinking, and by extension where the NFL is thinking. So I'll let you kind of take this one away and just any impressions and questions you may have for us, based off that new updated top 100.
Yeah, and I'm just going to throw this out. I'm going to throw out these names kind of for discussion because like I said, most of these guys, Alex and I have talked about quite a bit. Boy, it's like Christmas for me today. I get all these guys on the Zoom call, on this roundtable call, and then Gil Brandt releases his top 100. I mean, other than maybe going to the tattoo chair later on this evening, I don't think my day could get any better. But looking at some of these guys, some of the names that jumped off, I know several of us had some conversations here in the last couple of weeks in direct message about Penn State Pat Freiermuth, and you know how I am on tight ends. You know how I like to really go deep and look at the contextualization of these guys. For a while there, it looked like Pat Freiermuth out of Penn State was getting pushed into the first round. People talking about him maybe being a first-round option for the Steelers. After going deep into his tape, and I realized he had a couple good games. I think one in there against Ohio State in, 2019, I think maybe it was there. As the dust is starting to settle here, we see Pat Freiermuth show up at number 54 on Gil Brandt's list, down 16 spots overall. I want a couple of you to jump in and either pros or cons, or, why is he ranked 54th overall? Is that right? Just some pros and cons on Pat Freiermuth. Go, whoever wants it.
I'll kind of jump in there. I mean, I had him in that 51 to 60 window in terms of overall athlete, overall player in this class. I do know that he was dealing with that shoulder injury, so that kind of affected his blocking. And let's be honest, he hasn't had the greatest quarterback play the last few years. So I think that kind of capped his average depth of target. But, a great athlete. He could offer you some after the catch, but he feels like that security blanket tight end that can play in line. I think if he's there at 55, he's the pick, and I'd be pretty happy with it. But anything higher than that, I think you're overreaching with Pat Freiermuth.
Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll chime in. I'm kind of in the same line of Josh, just saying, like, he's kind of that security blanket kind of guy, and that's where I think we kind of seen the same thing, Dave, when we were in direct messaging about Pat, and just his short area depth of target was a problem for us. And one thing I noticed when doing a write-up on him, just for my own personal records, it was the fact that a lot of his big catches came on blown plays,
right,
or on plays where he was leaking out of the flat or leaking out into space, and he was wide open and no one was on him.
Nebraska was one of those, right?
Exactly. Yes,
right.
He was wide open. And it just doesn't seem like there was a lot of big, impressive catches, highlight reel catches. He'll have it where he can catch and run, and he's a big athletic receiver that can go through guys. But at the same time, I wasn't overly impressed with the quality of his catches compared to some other players in this draft class. Not to mention that while he can be served as a blocker, it kind of seems like he goes for one big light up shot, not really getting hands on, engaging and driving his feet when he gets on the block, compared to a guy like Tommy Tremble, who could probably be had a round or maybe two later, right, that would definitely complement a guy like Eric Ebron, who is more that receiving threat. So while they obviously have interest in Pat, they did have Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin at the Notre Dame Pro Day, and they might be looking for a good complement to Eric Ebron with more of a blocking style tight end, like a Tommy Tremble, who could develop into a receiver, much like you have said, Dave, rather than spending a high priority pick on a guy like Pat coming off that injury.
Anybody want to fight me and Jonathan on this? Come on. There got to be some anybody more pro Pat Freiermuth than Look, I don't hate the kid. I just think them pushing him up into the first round, and really, I think 55 might be a little strong for him, to be quite honest with you. Still, I see a little more talented Jesse James here than anything. And I think just because, okay, what if he is tight end too? I don't think you deserve to go 55 overall just because you're tight end number 2 in what really isn't all that stunning of a tight end class. Anybody else want to tackle Pat Freiermuth before we move on?
How about a question? You guys watched the film. How much will a blocking tight end, capable rookie, help this running game? Because you need to get the center in round 2. You're getting the running back in round 1. You've got a center and maybe a tackle somewhere in those top 4 rounds. And, at least one defensive player. And then what? Either another defensive player or a tight end, something oddball.
I think
how much does that tight end help?
I think you have to replace Vance McDonald for sure, and that was essentially his role. I'm not saying Freiermuth is on the level of a Vance McDonald as a blocking tight end, but having that second tight end, that blocking option, allows you to do much more offensively. I'd rather see that number 2 tight end out there than the number 3 swing tackle, because defenses will know what you're going to do with that swing tackle, unless you want Joe Haig dropping a touchdown again like he did in the Super Bowl. So, it's not super high on my list. I'd prefer Tremble, third round or one of those 2 fourth-round picks. But I think it's a significant hole when it comes to what this offense has looked like in the past. Now, we don't know what Canada's going to do, but just based off of past years, that number 2 tight end is important just from a run game perspective.
Daniel, let me just ask you a little more broadly. Who do you think is the second best tight end in this class behind Kyle Pitts?
I think it's probably Freiermuth. I mean, he would have been the number 1 tight end in last year's class if he declared. I thought he should have, because I didn't think he'd be able to measure up to some of the guys who were in this year's. But I do want to give some credit to Hunter Long out of Boston College.
There you go.
Because at the Senior Bowl, I was talking with a couple of people. I was there. I said, you know what? This guy's ceiling, I think he's Heath Miller. He's not going to make the big sexy play. He's not going to rip off the 60-yard catch or beat somebody down the field, but he's going to make reliable catches. He's going to constantly get open over the middle, and he's not going to be a liability blocking. So if the Steelers can address the offensive line and the running back in the first couple of rounds, I honestly think I'd prefer Hunter Long in the 3rd round to reaching on Freiermuth in the 2nd.
I think Greg Cosell, and I love Greg Cosell. I'll listen anytime Greg Cosell talks about players ahead of a draft and all. He compared Freiermuth to Heath Miller. I think Hunter Long's more Heath Miller than Freiermuth is, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate statement. And for the Steelers to get anybody who can be Heath Miller, that's perfect for them. That's what the Steelers look for in a tight end, I think, more so than at Ebron or a Ladarius Green, somebody who can stretch the field. So if they draft somebody like Freiermuth or Hunter Long and get good value, I think Ebron's gone after next year.
Tyler, go ahead, Scott.
What about the guys down in round 6, Farrell and Byer, and the H-back possibility? Because if I remember right, Canada loved using an H-back in college. That was Jalen Samuels, and he's got a couple of fullbacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Farrell was the lone tight end of combine invites to check every box and what they look for study, and Sean Bayer would have done so as well had he been a combine invite. He was one of the biggest snubs. Tyler Wise, I wanted to get you in here too, kind of wrapping up the Freiermuth conversation. Do you think he's the second best tight end in this class, or is it a Hunter Long or Tommy Tremble or somebody else?
I mean, I've always kind of been on a Freiermuth train, but I mean, I definitely, as I've watched him, kind of cool off a little bit. But the one thing I will go back to is I think it might have been one of last week's Depot podcasts. Alex, you asked Dave if he saw Freiermuth possibly being a starter in this league. I don't think the question was ever answered no. So if you're going to say he can be a starter in this league, most likely is a starter in this league, why would you not take him at 55? That's what I think.
Yeah, that's a fair question. And I just wanted to take a tight end above the 5th round because it's been a decade since they've done that. So I think investing in that position would be smart. Dave, what other prospects kind of, caught your attention in Gil Brandt's rankings?
Yeah, I think a real kind of, I don't know how polarizing he's going to be. I might be the one pushing back the most on JOK. Jeremiah Owusu, help me out here.
Usu Koromoa.
There, yeah, bless me. Look, I see the athleticism on the tape. I see them definitely move this kid around as a rover. I think if you look at overall, if you start charting him and look at the last 2 seasons where he lined up, I mean, this is obviously a guy that you can put out there in the slot. I just wonder, is he just so much of a unicorn and so much of, let's face it, I think he's 220 maybe, soaking wet. And I think didn't he gain a little bit of weight to get there on top of it? You see Gil Brandt, where does Gil Brandt have him at here? I just lost my
51.
place. Okay, Gil Brandt has him at 51 overall. I was a little bit surprised to see that. It looks like it was down 6 spots there. A lot of people have Jeremiah Owusu Koromoa going in the first first round, really a lock. Look, he knocked it out of the park, I think, as far as his measurables go. But we've seen these kind of players. Now, a lot of what I do when in the draft process too is I love looking at historical aspects as well too when it comes to the measurables and all. We've seen these kind of guys in the past. We think they go early, but they end up falling into the second and third round. Does Jeremiah fit with the Steelers, and is he too low on Gil Brandt's list? So a couple of you guys hop on that.
I'll grab him. I profiled him about a month ago. I think he's a little too low on Gil Brandt's list. I have him as a top 32 player, but he is a unicorn, and I don't see the fit with the Steelers. I don't see where he plays in base. I know that they don't play base as much, but you're not putting him on the field in obvious run situations next to Devin Bush. And then if he's in dime, where do you play him? He played, I think most of his snaps last year came in the slot, if I remember correctly, which is crazy to think about from a linebacker's perspective. But he's truly a unicorn, an elite athlete, but he's so small. Just in terms of on tape, he looks so small for the position. But I got to say, that was probably the most fun I've had watching a prospect this year, just because of the highlights left and right. But I can't see the fit with the Steelers as much as he's mocked to the Steelers. And Alex, I think you had him in your last mock at 24 to the Steelers.
I did.
It's a lot of fun on paper. It's awesome to add that type of athlete, but I don't know where he plays in base in this defense.
Jonathan, what do you think of JOK?
So when I joined, he was probably one of the very first people that I wanted to profile, and I saw that Josh actually did it, so I was kind of disappointed. So JOK is probably one of my favorite players to watch so far this draft season, having watched well over 100, 150 guys. His ability to play all over the field and wear so many hats for a defense, his athleticism, his playmaking ability, his ability to impact coverage as a coverage linebacker, being able to line up not only against running backs and tight ends, but also occasionally versus slot receivers and even on the outside. His ability to play chase and run as a sideline-to-sideline linebacker, that's kind of what you're looking for nowadays. And while the size is a concern, like going back to just your last podcast when guys were talking about overall his size and comparing like, okay, is 6'1", 6'2", 220, 221 compared to 6 foot or 5'11", 230, that big of a difference. You kind of have to look at athletic comps and whether or not they would fit possibly in the Steelers system. So the comp that I came to when I was looking at Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was a guy like Deion Jones that currently plays for the Atlanta Falcons. While you could kind of say like, oh, he doesn't have the size to play in the box, Deion Jones has been very effective in the box, but also more specifically as a run and chase defender and also in coverage. He has so many different pass deflections, interceptions that he's actually taken to the house for touchdowns over the last few years. You see that kind of impact in play with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Another guy that actually Lance Zierlein of NFL Network kind of compared him to, and I kind of liked it, was I think it was either Derwin James / kind of like a Jamal Adams kind of player. And, they're just kind of a freak unicorn player themselves where you can deploy them in a bunch of different roles and have them wear a bunch of different hats. Sure, you can have them in the box as a run and chase defender. You can have them split out into the slot. You can use them all over the place. So I was in agreement with Alex on this one when asking if he can play 700 to 800 snaps on defense because of the different hats he can play. Sure, he might have it where he can struggle with a 300-pound offensive guard coming and pulling up to the second level in terms of getting off those blocks. But the veracity that he shoots those gaps and is able to play, and it's not like he has bad play strength either. I really like his game, and I think just having him next to Devin Bush would be a dynamic duo in the middle. We'll see if they decide to go that route. It obviously looks like running back at this point, so we probably will never get to see it. But I would be a fan of that pick should it happen.
I guess this is my question, and sorry to jump in there, Alex. I think I remember Dave mentioning this, and I'm open to the conversation. Do we trust Keith Butler and Mike Tomlin to have a plan for this man?
That's a good point.
let's be honest here.
Maybe that's why I'm pushing back. So I mean, look, Jonathan, look out on the edge. He can blow up wide. He can fight through on quick wide receiver screens. Fine. You can see him occasionally, depending on who he's up against. You can see him set the edge on the outside sometimes when asked to play out there in the slot and kind of forced to run inside there. I worry most about this kid. I think in between the tackle box. If I see him on the field, and if I'm Baltimore, I'm going large. I'm collapsing down and I'm running a football, and I want him to get involved in the running game. That's one of my biggest concerns. He is fun. It's just I wonder a master, a jack of many trades. Is he really a master of one of them? And kind of, knowing the Steelers defensively and all, will they know how to use him? Look, all it's going to take is one team to love him, and he's easy to love for him to go in the first 32 picks, or really the first 60. I think most of us expect he'll be off the board in the first 50. I think he is that kind of player there. But one of the two real main concerns I have is how he would fit with the Steelers.
Oh, and as someone who watches DB play, do you think that JOK can function in space in the NFL? He was used as an overhang player quite often. Notre Dame, do you think that can still work and translate on Sundays?
Yeah, no, watching his tape, I mean, I agree with Josh. I don't necessarily see the fit for him in the Steelers' base scheme. I think him next to Devin Bush, you just don't necessarily have enough size on the field. You don't have that traditional buck type of linebacker. But in terms of whether I think he is able to play in space, I think he could play outside a little bit. I think similar to a guy like Jabril Cox. You look for Pittsburgh, you see it in the Cleveland game, they're not really traveling their corners much on the inside. So I think we need to look more towards maybe finding that coverage type of linebacker. So whether JOK is going to play in base or not, I think you see it with maybe Tampa Bay in the playoffs, where if you can put two athletic type of guys next to each other on the inside, you are able to kind of leave your corners on the outside and play them a little bit more into man coverage. And Pittsburgh plays a lot of cover 1, cover 3 type stuff. So I think he could function well in terms of, can he man the slot? I think maybe as a big nickel. I don't know as a traditional nickel or in dime, but in terms of, I think he could help you fill what Mike Hilton was giving you on early downs.
That was going to be my tongue-in-cheek response to will Keith Butler use him. I think you need to draft JOK because of the way Keith Butler and Mike Tomlin have used these linebackers matched up on receivers. If they're going to keep doing that, you might as well put some really good athletes on the field to cover Jarvis Landry in the slot, for example. So any other final thoughts there on JOK?
How many of you guys think he's going to go in the first 32 picks, and how many of you guys think he falls down into the second round?
I have him in that 17-18 window right there with the Raiders and the Dolphins, especially after the Dolphins let Kyle Van Noy go. But, I mean, I know it's a different front office, but the Raiders are always the Raiders and will draft athletes first and foremost. So I think that's kind of his window. So I would definitely say top 32, top 20, essentially for me.
Yeah, I agree with Josh. Honestly, the problem with JOK is that we have Devin Bush. If we had a big run stuffing linebacker and needed somebody mobile to do the run and chase, we'd be all over that kid. So it's only the fact that you got the two light guys together that's causing the problem.
So you think a Zaven Collins is a better fit in Pittsburgh than a JOK?
I do.
Okay. Does anyone not think that JOK is going to be a top 32 guy ultimately when draft day rolls around?
Me.
You don't think he's going to be top 30? What do you think he gets drafted? You think he's top 50?
I think he goes top 50. I just wonder if teams will have, because he is such a unicorn teams kind of struggling maybe where is his position at the NFL level. Yeah, he's all athlete and once again his tapes, a lot of his tapes fantastic. I just wonder if he's that guy that people just unsure that causes him to fall into the top of the second round. I'm not saying he's going to fall far if he does, but I personally from what I've seen, I think there's a chance of that happening maybe.
And I do wonder if there's, some of that PTSD from other teams, seeing what happened with Isaiah Simmons last year in Arizona early on. Simmons went 8th overall. And I mean, I remember midway through the year, people were like, this guy's a bust. He doesn't have a true position. And I think there are still some older defensive coordinators out there that you have to be this type of player, fill this type of role, and they don't know how to use those unicorns. So I do wonder if teams are scared off by that a little bit. So that's a fair point, Dave.
And Simmons, look, he was a unicorn, but he's one of those Planet Theory guys too. On top of it, he had size to him too, and guys like him are not supposed to move that way. At least going in JOK's favor is it's not like it's that earth shattering that a guy his size moves the way that he moves. I think the more interesting aspect with him is how he's able to fit, maybe the level of physicality that he does have for a guy that his size, I think. And I worry when you jump from the pro level, from the college level to the pro level, okay, you're another fast 6 foot, 215-pound guy, and especially on the defensive side of the ball. So that's where I worry about him. But it's not a diss on him. I just wonder just how he moved around, how he's going to fit at the NFL level, if that will cause him to fall out of the first round.
Dave, throw one more player out at us from Gil Brandt's list that you thought was worth discussing.
Yeah, most definitely. And this one probably going to be right up Owen's line to start there. And that, where we mentioned him already, Ahsante Samuel Jr. This is a guy that I think if you boil it down and you look at all the places where Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert went, who in the heck did they go to Florida State to see? And there's not, obviously Alex brought up a couple of edge rushers, and that's nice. And obviously they had the defensive tackle over there that probably one of the ones that probably best matches what the Steelers look for in kind of that 3-4-eye 5-tech kind of guy. But that's not why they went there. They went there to see Ahsante Samuel Jr. And we've already talked about, boy, you start checking off the boxes with this kid, the measurables, the bloodline. Seems to be a good kid overall. Good long corners that can play both inside and outside are kind of hard to find. I have toyed with the idea that maybe Ahsante Samuel could even be be the pick at 24 if they didn't go on the offensive side of the ball. And now I look at Gil Brandt's rankings, and he's 66 overall. Now I understand there's got some nice corners in this class and all. So I'll throw it out to you guys to discuss Ahsante Samuel. Is this a guy that maybe does that will or should go in the first round, and why does Gil probably have him ranked 66 overall? I think it's a perfect spot for maybe Owen to start with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. So when I first heard about Ahsante Samuel, I remembered his dad back when I really first started watching football, and he wasn't exactly like a lockdown corner, but he was an absolute ball hawk. He was leading the NFL with 9-10 interceptions every year. And I think what you didn't see in his dad's game, which you do see in Ahsante Samuel Jr.'s game, is the physicality, where he's really willing to come up and support the run. And it makes him a particularly effective defender in shallow underneath zones. I think in Pittsburgh's scheme, you get a lot of cover 1, you get a lot of cover 3. He carries vertically pretty well, and I thought he had pretty good ball skills too. And I think, especially in terms of is he going to be there, is he going to be the pick, I think you see a lot of guys starting to rise, especially like Newsome rising a lot, J.C. Horn rising a lot. So you're probably going to see 3 to 4 corners picked before that pick even happens. I think he could be a fit there. I think, without the injury history, I tend to like Farley a little bit more in terms of just the ability to play man coverage at a little bit higher of a level. But I do like Ahsante Samuel. I definitely wouldn't be mad if that was the pick at 24.
You think he'll be there at 50? What's the chance of him being there? And once again, I hate people saying he won't be there. Yeah. He won't be there. It's just let's talk about the player. But with that said, what? Tell me this: why do you think Gil Brandt has him ranked so low? Let's just attack it that way.
I think in terms of I've seen a couple different people just it doesn't really have that lockdown press man coverage ability that you're getting of some of the higher guys. It would be the main thing. Some people view him as a little bit more of a zone cornerback. I tend to think he can hold up in man pretty well, but I would think that's probably Gil's reasoning. In terms of do I think he's going to be there, I don't think he gets past mid-second round. Like you said, I don't really like to say that, but just going through the different names, Stokes, Campbell, guys that should be going in that range, I think it'd be pretty hard to see him making it to where the Steelers are in the second round. And if he did make it there, I think you run up straight to the board because that clears a really good need. I think they have to pretty much go corner in rounds 1 through 3, or else you got a decent-sized hole on that defense.
Well,
anybody else want to jump on Ahsante real quick?
I can.
Yeah.
I think the problem is 5'10" and an eighth, 180 pounds with 30-inch arms. he doesn't have the pure length upside to be Darrelle Revis.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you look at him and it's like, of course, he's 5'10", and he's a little undersized, but you also look at some of the corners that they've deployed in the past. Like Joe Hayden isn't this freakishly long athletic player. Like he ran the mid to high 4.5s at his Florida day. So, and that's the things like I see with Ahsante. Like he obviously breaks on the ball well, but he isn't overly twitchy when it comes to clicking and closing. His long speed also can be a little suspect at times when you're watching him against like physical specimens on the outside. And it's just, I think that he can be a tad slow when breaking on inside breaking routes. And just like what Scott said, his size can be a problem. Like if he's trying to carry and trying to handle running backs going to the outside and being able to get off of blocks and play against the run. But however, much how Owen was trying to say, like he is very, very physical. Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure Owen saw the play where he cut down A.J. Dillon at the line of scrimmage, just throwing his body at the guy. He's extremely physical for his size, and he plays with a lot of tenacity. So I think when you're looking at him, he's a guy that, people might say, oh, he's early if you could look at 24. But at the same time, in Pittsburgh's mind, they might be like, oh, if we don't grab him at 24, the likelihood of him being there at 55 can be in question and in doubt, which is why they would be interested in taking him at 24, because they've already had players on the roster that fit that similar mode, like players like Joe Hayden that aren't the most physical freaks, but are very strong, very tenacious players on the outside and can hold up their own, but also are this guy that, they're safe. Whereas guys like Campbell and Stokes, obviously ripping off crazy 40 times, have that length, have that height, but at the same time, they're kind of more projections. Whereas with Ahsante Samuel and the film that he's put out, you kind of know what you're getting.
Tyler, did you have a thought on Ahsante Samuel and kind of his stock?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you can grab a guy that, with his physicality and everything and, man coverage ability, I'd be comfortable sticking him at the nickel day one. And I think anytime you can get, a starter in, if we're saying 55 or even, at 24, anytime you get a starter right out the gate, I think that's something you can really, obviously you should convey that. So, that, and you can kind of see the regression as well, because he probably is in the end going to be an outside corner. So you can stick him at, nickel for, as a rookie year, then, we don't know what's going to happen with Hayden. Hopefully Lane develops. I particularly don't have, a ton of faith in Lane, but, a lot of people have faith in Pierre too. So, there's definitely pieces to kind of move around there. But I think when you add Samuel to that room, you have a clear-cut day one starter at nickel.
Daniel, would you consider Ahsante Samuel Jr. at 24, or do you think he's if he's there at 55 kind of guy?
If I'm making a list of the guys who have some chance of falling to 55, Ahsante Samuel Jr. is probably 1 or 2 on it, and I'm praying that he falls there. But the 24, it's just a little rich. If the team had a better solution on the offensive line, a better backfield, and could take guys on day 2 that could fill that without a problem, then I would say, yeah, you go ahead and take the guy who can basically be a better Mike Hilton as a rookie. But the other needs outweigh the need at corner. So unless a guy like Caleb Farley falls to them, I think you have to pass on corner as much as it is, as fun as it is to imagine Ahsante Samuel in black and gold.
Fair enough. All right, good discussion there. You can check out Gil Brandt's.
Go
ahead, Dave.
More, yeah.
Okay,
Alex's boy, Landon Dickerson. Once again, the tape is there. Up 14 spots. I feel like I'm Casey Kasem moving up 14 spots. On the top 50 this week. No, Landon Dickerson up to 23. The big thing. Look, if this kid did not have the medical problems, we've talked about it. Right out of the get-go, Alex and I, if he didn't have the medical problems, he would probably be the odds-on. Him and Naji would be in the talk easily, I think, to be the pick. Now, we saw Tony Pauline come out with his the report he came out with today saying Landon Dickerson and Naji Harris are one of the 3 people that the Steelers are settled on. We've seen these reports in the past. We'll see. With all that said, somebody sell me other than Alex why Landon Dickerson should be in play at 23, and is indeed Landon Dickerson the best center in this year's draft?
You're going to wave your magic wand and remove all the injury concerns?
I cannot do that. And look, to be fair, and Alex makes sure to point this out all the time, we don't all we know is the games that he's missed and the supposed injuries that he's had and the surgeries that he's had. We have no way of telling where he's at right now, medical wise, although you see him doing cartwheels at the Alabama Pro Day. He looks like it would be surprising if he's not ready by the start of the regular season. So let's assume, and that's dangerous, let's assume that he will be ready week 1 of the season. You people talk to me more about Landon Dickerson.
Tom, what do you think about Dickerson?
Well, I think if you really want to make this offensive line better and make it nasty, he's the guy you got to go with. He's got the play, he's got the size, he's got the length, he's got everything you want. The injuries are a major concern, but injuries can happen to anyone at any time, and there's nothing you can do about that. If you want to improve the running game, it starts up front. And it doesn't matter who the running back is if you don't have people up there blocking for him. So if you want someone that's going to be the rock in the middle of that lineup, Dickerson's your guy.
Scott, who do you think is the best center in this class? Is it Dickerson? Is it Creed Humphrey? Is it somebody else?
I think it's Dickerson. I don't think it's close. But I mean, honestly, I come at this from a different angle. I look at the Steelers and I think, where do they have legends? And what are the Pittsburgh Steelers? And it's Mike Webster, Dirk Dawson, Pouncey most recently. That position is the spot that Pittsburgh has been greater than every other team in history, period. And there's nobody even close. So, I mean, I like Josh Myers. I think he's a good value pick. He's likely to be the guy at 55, but I'm not happy because he isn't going to be Webster or Dawson. Dickerson, I mean, that guy, he could be anything. I mean, he's closer to Webster, I suppose, than Dawson. But, he's special. Humphrey, I think, he may be Pouncey. The scoring, the athletic testing he did broke every record there is. He's a 100 on the relative athletic score. But even so, I think he's number 2 behind Dickerson, assuming there's no injury.
Yeah, it's crazy. The top 2 RAS scores were from this year's class. Quinn Miners at 2 and Creed Humphrey at 1. So it's just crazy to see that in this class. Josh, who do you think in the battle of Humphrey versus Dickerson, who do you like better? And were you surprised that, at least according to Pauline's report, that Humphrey's not on that list, but Dickerson is?
I would still lean Dickerson just a bit. I mean, when you can get a guy who's just constantly pissed off on every snap at center, that's who you go with. But, man, I think in the Steelers' new offense that we think it's going to look like under Matt Canada, this coming year and hopefully future years, I think that more athletic center like Humphrey fits. Wasn't surprised that Dickerson was named. I was surprised Humphrey wasn't in there just because of the athleticism and knowing what the Steelers lost at center. But
he's at 48.
Who's
Humphrey's
that?
at 48. On
48?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but just considering what the Steelers lost with the retirement of Pouncey in terms of that attitude on the field and in the locker room, you want to replace that and try and find a carbon copy, it's Landon Dickerson.
So is anyone not comfortable with the idea of Dickerson being the pick at 24? Anyone who has reservations about that? Is that you, Josh? Okay.
I am, just because of those injuries. I mean, I think if he's had 2 ACL tears,
2 ankle injuries.
That's tough, especially when you're in the center of everything. No pun intended there with center, but you're right in the middle. And if you've had so many lower body injuries like that, I mean, we saw Pouncey get rolled up on a ton.
But Pouncey recovered. Pouncey did recover.
Right. He did play 11 seasons. It really concerns me with Dickerson's injury history. Like Scott said earlier, if you could wave the magic wand and that injury history is gone, he's probably a top 15 player. But you have to take those medical red flags into account. And man, part of me, if he's the pick at 24, I'm jumping off my couch excited because they got just a nasty Ryan Jensen-like guy at center. The other part of me is like, well, how many years are we going to get out of him? When does that first injury pop up? So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, Jonathan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to chime in on that. So kind of working with a background in strength conditioning and exercise and sports performance, you kind of understand the idea that, okay, it's possible to recover from an injury and then come back from it. but your chance of re-injury after sustaining said injury is higher after the fact, especially when you're dealing with knee and ankle joints. So in the fact of Landon Dickerson, I love his film. The dude is as nasty can be. He's a dancing bear. He's played all over the offensive line. During his time at Florida State, he played guard and tackle, and now he moved and was a phenomenal center for the Crimson Tide. I mean, there's not much that he can't do. Like, occasionally he overextends, and like there's a bunch of offensive linemen that we'll watch that will do that. Yeah, I mean, he can climb to the second level. He has good mobility overall for being almost 6'6", over 320 pounds. So as a fit, like, it would be perfect to have that guy that's could be in the middle and just kind of set the tone for the offense, especially the run game. But again, it's weighing overall the risk versus reward with him. And, you know, Pouncey was a player that often dealt with a lot of injuries going back from his time at the beginning of Pittsburgh and all the way through the end. And that was one thing that if you probably had to ask the Steelers, you know, would you deal with all these injuries to have the player that you have? They would say yes in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. So that's something that they probably are considering with Landon Dickerson. And he honestly could be the dark horse at 24. Like, we could be all on the top of Naji Harris, and I'm on that train included, that he's the guy at 24. Should he be there? But, you know, we could get a curveball come draft day, and Landon Dickerson could have been their guy all along that they're going to Alabama to see. But yeah, the injuries and knowing how the mechanism of injury happens and the course that it can happen in case of re-injury, that scares me with kind of my background. And that's where I'm a little hesitant. Should he be there at 24? Obviously, you'd love to see him in the second, but again, you know, you don't want to play the game, oh, he won't be there. Mm-hmm. But, you know, you'd have to imagine that some team would take that risk on him a little bit earlier if he's their second pick, much like the Steelers would if he was the second pick in their second round.
Good points all around for sure. I want to talk about the other two players mentioned in Pauline's report. Naji Harris, of course, running back from Alabama. We've discussed him a lot. We can't hear in a second, but I want to talk about the other guy as well, Tevin Jenkins, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma State, one of the nasty maulers in the run game in this class. Daniel, I'll start with you. Were you surprised to hear Jenkins' name in connection with Pittsburgh, and just your thoughts on Jenkins overall?
Absolutely not. I've had Jenkins earmarked as somebody the Steelers would be very fortunate to have fall to them at 24, because I don't think he makes it there. I think the tackles are going to go quick. I think they're going to go early. A couple months ago, I was saying maybe Christian Darrisaw from Virginia Tech falls. There's not a chance of that. I don't think there's much of a chance of Jenkins falling, and it's because of how mean he plays, how strong he plays. He is exactly what you want for the Steelers at right tackle, and that is another issue. If you get Tevin Jenkins, who do you start at left tackle? Zach Banner, Tevin Jenkins. Do you try to put Chucks over there and see? I don't see a left tackle out of the three of them. I see three right tackles. I don't think that'll stop the Steelers from making the pick if he falls to them, but I don't think it's going to happen at all. I think some team is going to take him before 24 and start him right away week one.
That was going to be my follow-up question. If he was to pick hypothetically, and Tyler, I'll throw it to you, how would that depth chart look? Would it be Jenkins at right tackle? Jenkins does have a little bit of time at left tackle at Oklahoma State as well. Would Banner move? Would Okorafor move? How do you think that would play out?
Yeah, I mean, when we took Chooks played left tackle in college, correct?
Correct.
So, I mean, I would assume you'd actually want to try to move him over there and see what he could do. Banner was going to be the starting right tackle last year, and they obviously were very ecstatic about getting him back. I'm taking from Banner's words of how he phrased his meeting with Tomlin. So, however that might be, but at the same time, I would assume that would be how it would be. But if you add Jenkins in that mix, I mean, I really don't. I mean, you're probably not going to move. Do you move Banner back out to the swing tackle? Like, I really don't know how that would work, honestly.
Right. I think Banner would have to start. They paid him that money. Like, he's got to start this year. Yeah.
And Banner has experience at left tackle. He played left tackle at USC. So
correct. Do we think do we want to see him there in real life though? Like now in the NFL?
I went and looked. Tevin Jenkins, seven career starts at Oklahoma State at left tackle, and only one, I think, or one game last year in 2020 at left tackle. 3 in 2019, 3 at 2000. This guy comes out of Oklahoma State. And I think a lot of you probably agree. I haven't gone deep in him as probably some of you have, but this kid's going to cut his teeth at right tackle, I would think, at the NFL eventually. Now, maybe he can move over to left tackle as time goes on, but I think when Tevin Jenkins hits the NFL, it's going to be right tackle initially.
I still weigh a lot on too the fact that Tomlin and Colbert were not there, and I'm keeping that
huge.
all the way. I'm keeping that all the way.
We also don't know who was there. I mean, I don't believe Tomlin and Colbert were there, but I still have not been able to figure out who was at Oklahoma State's pro day.
We know that they had someone there, though, because we know the ties that they have with the Oklahoma State program over the last few years. So, and
was Clem anywhere that day, Alex? Did you have Clem tracked down that day?
I can check here. I'm not sure, but let me check here.
Dave, the one point you brought up about Jenkins cutting his teeth at right tackle, I wrote in my report on him. He just reminds me of Orlando Brown Jr. I know Orlando Brown Jr. is, I think, 3 inches taller than him and probably 20 pounds heavier. But, I mean, Jenkins is just as nasty as Orlando Brown is in the run game. And we saw how Orlando Brown Jr. did last year at left tackle. Now he wants to be paid as a left tackle. I think I watched 12 games of Jenkins from 2018 to 2020. I think he can handle left tackle if he's given the opportunity in the NFL. Obviously, you'd want to bring him in and let him, as you say, cut his teeth in the run game at right tackle. But he showed good feet and a good punch at left tackle and really held up well. So I think it's certainly possible. But if you're drafting him at 21, I don't think you're making that bet his rookie year.
The one other thing that stuck out, he talked after he got done at cussing, dropping some F-bombs at Alex a couple times during the
not at me in response to some questions I
had. Tomato, right?
All right.
Why did they have to turn his light on? You know what I'm saying? Why did he need that switch flipped? What was that? That was after his after the 2019 season, wasn't it, Alex? That he talked about that. I think it was after 2000. Why did he all of a sudden become that guy in 2020? Josh, were you the one that broke him down? Did you see how noticeable was it from 2019 to 2020?
I actually saw some of it in 2019 there at the end of the year. It started in that Iowa State game. He just looked like a different player in 2020, though, for sure. And I know that he's mentioned that in previous interviews. But I can't really pinpoint why or when that light was turned on for him. But, I mean, I'm sure Oklahoma State was glad.
Sure.
I just don't know what it is. I mean, I'm going to have to go back and look at some of 2018 tape again. But like I said, late in 2019, you could tell that every time he stepped on the field, he had a chip on his shoulder, and he just wanted to bury the guy across from him. And they started to run behind him, and his play just kind of elevated. But to answer your question, I really don't know why that light needed to be turned on. That's a pretty good question that I haven't quite figured out and have to dive back into the tape on.
All right, if you want another little strike on him as well, too, as far as the pro, Tomlin and Colbert not there, the fact that this team has, when's the last time this team took a tackle in the first round of the draft? You got that strike against them as well, too. And then, look, I don't know if you read my post on Naji Harris and his age earlier today and how it relates in historically with Kevin Colbert and first round draft picks. I mean, this kid's 23, going to be 23.16 years old come draft day there. That would put him up there as far as one of the older first round draft picks that Kevin Colbert has had during his history in Pittsburgh too. So that would be another kind of, I mean, look, they're all streaks until they get broken, right? But Alex and I are kind of high on the historical aspect. When you have a general manager that's been in Pittsburgh as long as Kevin Colbert is, there's a lot of Blues clues along the way there. So I would add that his age to another list of the things that would make you think, I'm not so sure this guy will be the pick.
And to answer Dave's question, we do not know where Adrian Clem was on April 1st, the day of Oklahoma State's pro day. We know the day before he was at Notre Dame with Tomlin and Colbert checking out the 4 Fighting Irish offensive linemen.
Okay.
All right, so good discussion there on Tevin Jenkins. The last guy in Pauline's report, a guy we've talked about a ton, Dave, and I want to get you guys' take as well, is Naji Harris, the running back from Alabama. I'll start with you, Tom, just your overall impressions of Naji Harris, and I'm guessing, but I'll ask the question, you can probably see him as the pick at 24.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much where everybody's headed right now, but one question is what happens if he isn't there? But as for him overall, he's probably about as complete back as you can get coming out. You know, he can catch the ball. He's got quickness behind the line of scrimmage. He can run over guys if he has to. You know, we haven't had a running back do that in a while in Pittsburgh, and I think I'm with Dave here that taking a first round running back isn't probably the best way for a team to go. But if they're going to take one, I think he's definitely the guy.
Oh, and we had asked readers on Steelers Depot Monday who they preferred, Naji Harris or Travis Etienne. Harris won that vote decidingly, about 76 to, I think, 23%. Where do you come in on Harris versus Etienne?
Yeah, and I think for me, it's not too hard of a decision. I look at Naji Harris. I see a guy a lot like, you hear the comp a lot, but Le'Veon Bell, just in terms of the vision behind the line, the ability to just create 5-10 yards on his own, and he really lacks that home run ability. I think that's what a lot of people get held up on looking at him, whereas maybe with a guy like Etienne, you get more of that. Etienne, to me, feels a little bit more almost like a Dalvin Cook, where it's like he can just hit the hole and it just be gone, no problem. Both solid receivers, I'd say. It seems like Naji ran a little bit more advanced of a route tree, a little bit more effective downfield, so I think that definitely helps in Pittsburgh. And then I don't know. I think for Naji, it's just you look at what the Steelers really struggled with. I keep coming back to it's just short yardage. They can't get those conversions, and it feels like he's a guy, the Saquon thighs and whatnot, just a guy that can really push that pile downhill and get some hard yardage.
Yeah, I think that's where it starts with Steelers' mantras. They want to get more physical. They want to get tougher. They want to win better in short yardage. Tyler, where do you come in on the idea of running back in the first round? Such almost a third rail to talk about in the NFL draft or for teams to do. Do you think it's worth taking a running back in general? And then Harris specifically, would he be worth a pick at 24?
And does the age worry anybody too?
I don't think the age worries me to go out that first a bit, just because, I think no matter what, if you're going to take Naji Harris, number one, your plan is going to be the 4 years plus the 5th year option, and then he's gone anyways. And that's going to be a shelf life most likely, maybe he goes off because, maybe 2 or 3 years a different team, but that's going to be your plan with him. So, I'm fine with that. And I'd rather, if we're going to go that route, go with him. I'm all for Harris rather than Etienne in round 1 if we're going to take it back. And that's going to be because if we're taking it back round 1 and you're not fixing that O-line first, you got to get it back that can create on his own. So that's where I'm going with Harris in that way. Etienne, I want to say it was Nate Tice on Twitter throughout a comp, and it was Willie Parker. And I really see that as, a kind of an off-the-wall comp you might not have heard before. But just because if with our line right now, I feel like it's going to be one of those where it's either he's going to get stuff for a 1-yard run or it's going to be a 90-yard run. And that's the way it was with Willie Parker. I remember back in, I think 2007, I think he led the league in less than 3-yard gains or something like that. And I feel like that was a similar, at least run line now as it was back in 2007. So if you're going to add someone to that in the first round, definitely going with Harris. Now, generally speaking, if Harris was not here, take him out completely. I don't want to touch a running back in the first round. And that's the way I would be, 9 times out of 10 in the draft, because I kind of lean towards the running backs don't matter community in that way. It's because I think you can do that. And my number one thing would be Sermon in the third would be, value to position would be Sermon in the third, but I don't know if we're going to get past the second without drafting someone. So.
To expand on the age thing, for Harris, if he was, let's say he was 22, it's not like he's all of a sudden a 10-year player. As you said, Tyler, he's going to be probably a one-and-done guy, and you just, you accept that with drafting really any running back in the first round. So, Dave, I know you did the study on running backs. I think that was really good data in terms of him being one of the older running backs, not only for Pittsburgh, but just in general of guys that have been drafted in the first round. Did that study and that information dissuade you at all from the idea, or at least a desire for Harris to be the guy at 24?
No, but you would swear that you say
Dave Bryant, no Naji Harris hater. LSU fan, Dave Bryant.
You know how it is when we do these things. It's been something I've been meaning to get to as part of this process here, is the age factor. Look, everybody knows how I feel about the fungibility factor, but my job is not to talk about who I wouldn't take. More than anything, it's more along the lines of who do I think the Steelers like, who do I think they will take. But it is, look, there's no doubt that you're going to bust a couple of trends here by going that way. I mean, the last back they took running back in a draft in the first round was obviously Rashad Mendenhall, and when he was drafted, I think he still to this date remains the third youngest first round draft pick that the Steelers had. So, okay, they went running back, something they normally don't do, but they got him a young one in doing so. And then when you just look over the history of Kevin Colbert going all the way back, and once again, these trends are made to be broken, right? We saw it with Artie Burns several years ago. They never draft a cornerback in the first round. I wish that streak would still be alive. to be quite honest, I think everybody listening to this would hope that as well too. But look, if they take Naji in the first round, he will be the third. What did I write? The third oldest all time, and then he will be the oldest offensive player come draft day that the Steelers have ever drafted. Now, once again, the value that comes with the first round pick more than anything else is the ability to have the fifth round option. Anything past that, I think, is gravy. I have said all along, if they do draft a running back in the first round, it better be one that can log 750 to 900 snaps, one that you don't have to pull off the field in certain situations, one that can do it all. And I believe I said right out of shoot when you asked me about the running backs going through in the first time, how would I rank them? And I said, Naji, I think is the guy there. So if they're going to go running back in the first round, then I think it should be Naji Harris.
My favorite meaningless, quirky Steelers stat is every single Super Bowl the Steelers have won, they've had a first-round running back on the roster. Whether that was Franco Harris or Rashad Mendenhall or Jerome Bettis, granted not drafted by Pittsburgh. You get the point. Scott,
a lot of people forget that Rashad got knocked out halfway through the season during his rookie season, right?
by Ray Lewis.
Ray Lewis took care of that in a heartbeat, didn't he? Now I think Naji's put together a little bit better than Rashad was when he came out and all like that, but I just worry about the fungibility of the position and the wear and tear and the injury factor. If you look at these last however many running backs over the course of the last 5 years, what is the percentage of the games that those backs have missed during that time? So you better go into it knowing that you're probably going to get a running back that's going to miss some games, and you're probably going to get a running back that you're going to throw on the pile after 4 or 5 years.
Scott, I wanted to ask you, I see almost a direct one-to-one comparison between Naji Harris and Le'Veon Bell. Is that a fair comparison, and just your overall thoughts on Harris?
I go by secondhand opinions. I'm going to defer to the guys who watched the film. Everyone I've read says, yes, he's a lot like Le'Veon Bell. I only really watched the championship game. And what convinced me to fall in love with the guy there is Ohio State had him bottled up a bunch of times. And he made those yards on his own. That's what I wanted to know. But after that, I'll defer.
Yeah, that's the big thing for me. Can a running back create? Any running back can get what's blocked. That's easy to do. But can they be able to create on their own? And I know Harris ran behind arguably the best offensive line in football, but he still created. I think, Dave, you tweeted out the clip from Brian Baldinger today of showing him creating and the ability to do so and get what isn't there. And I think he is capable of that, even if he didn't always have to do that in that high-powered Bama offense.
And I think, and you and I, Alex, have had this conversation, I think, a couple times over years when evaluating running backs. Any of them can reel off the 75-yard run through the massive hole and all. We see well-schemed runs work because they're supposed to work when they're well-schemed and executed. What happens when things don't go right? The backs that can, and I think Akers out of Florida State, one of those kids last year that we talked about, man, that kid sure could create because he had to, man. That offensive line just was getting him in trouble there. And that was one of the more impressive things I think about Akers when it came to last year's draft class. Naji is one of those players I think that does that. And that, in my opinion, along with several other things, is what sets some running backs apart. And, we have seen Naji create in desperation situations where things don't go as planned.
Josh, you wanted to throw out a comp to Naji Harris?
Yeah, I said this on Twitter the other day after just a ridiculous take from local Pittsburgh media outlet comparing him to Eddie Lacy. But I see Matt Forte. I've seen that since his freshman year at Alabama. Naji Harris is pretty underrated as a receiver. I know he wasn't used much there at Alabama, but he's got great hands. I know the Le'Veon Bell comp is a popular one, but when I watch Naji Harris, I see Matt Forte with the ability to create. He's not going to rip off those chunk runs. I think he had like 25, 20-plus yard runs in his career at Alabama. I guess that would match Le'Veon Bell in Pittsburgh some, but I just see Matt Forte, a guy that's a 3-down back, can really be a weapon out of the backfield in the passing game and someone that can handle significant wear and tear in the backfield.
And he did have 80 catches over the last 2 seasons.
Right.
And in that offense with Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle and Jerry Jeudy last year, like to get 80 catches in 2 seasons, that offense I think is pretty impressive. Jonathan, it sounded like you were shaking your head to the yes and to the Forte comparison.
Yeah, I was evaluating him last year thinking that he was going to declare, and then obviously he came back to school for his senior season. And like when I was watching him, I was like, this guy's Matt Forte. Like I obviously tried to come up with pro comparisons with a lot of the people that I watch, and like it was 1 for 1. It was one of the ones that I was probably the most confident in over watching players like the last 5-6 years was with Naji Harris to Matt Forte. Just his size, the way that he plays, the fluidity in his game for his size. I mean, I personally spent an entire summer with the Florida Gators back in 2018 working with their strength conditioning department. So I got the opportunity to work with a bunch of their players that Alabama played this year and seeing them split out wide to the right side for that touchdown that they threw in the red zone and just basically playing like a wide receiver just the same way that Matt Forte does. Just his movement skills for that side, the way he can play physical, the way he can go around you, he can go over you, he can go through you. Obviously, you have to look at the overall value of the running back and how, running backs don't matter. They don't deserve to go in the first round. But the way that Pittsburgh has kind of set themselves up, it's almost reminiscent to what happened with the Devin Bush situation, where there's a glaring hole on their roster. They needed to draft a running back. And then after the 2 Devins, Devin White and Devin Bush, it was just a fall off after that. And it kind of seems the same this year when you have Naji Harris, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, and then it kind of seems like a drop-off after that, whereas, Trey Sermon could possibly be a lead back. Ramondre Stevenson could possibly be a lead back. You have Kenneth Gainwell, who could be a fun chess piece that you could deploy in different areas, but there isn't really that guaranteed source. And if Pittsburgh really wants to improve the run game, as they've continually shown, they want to get one of those 3 backs. And that's where it's really looking like when you look at national media circles and you look at all the news surrounding Pittsburgh, that they're going to go that route, much like they did with Devin Bush, making the trade up, breaking a trend that they never do in terms of trading up in the first round to get Devin Bush. That's where it looks like they're going to break that trend. Take an older running back. While he's older, he didn't really play a whole lot until his junior and senior season, sitting behind guys like Damian Harris and Josh Jacobs for his first 2 years until he finally got the time to shine as the lead bell cow for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point, a really good summary of that. And we know the Steelers and Mike Tomlin specifically love feature backs. And if you don't get Harris or one of those top guys, then you start to struggle. Okay, is even a Trey Sermon going to be a feature back because he hasn't always been that guy who's splitting time before? So I think that's a good point there. Any other final thoughts on Naji Harris?
Yeah, Alex, actually, I have a question for all you guys. When I was watching the Steelers this year, I didn't think the offensive line was the entire problem, because I saw a lot of isolation runs where the line did its job. The back had one person to beat, and they didn't do it. The only one who ever seemed to really beat that one last guy was Connor. And you got to get that running back where when you block everybody up and he's isolated on a safety or he's isolated on that one extra linebacker, he'll beat him and then make the yardage. Now, am I crazy about that?
No.
Well, no, there was make no mistake, there was some of the issues on that offensive line as well too. So one of the bigger things that I was disappointed was we didn't get to see, not that he would have been the answer, but why didn't you give Benny Snell some games to go start to end there. We have seen Benny Snell get better as games go along. I think he's came out of college more known as a slow starter, and maybe that's not good enough. One of the knocks on this on the Steelers offense for 4 or 5 years now is successful run rates early in games with this team. Look, the mix and match. Obviously, the Steelers don't seem to want to have any part of that. McFarland looked as lost as he could be last year. So why didn't Snell get a bigger, more of an opportunity to do that? But yeah, I mean, I see where Scott's coming from. But I guess what I'm getting at is this offense needs more than just another back to get this run game back successful, in the top 10 of the league where it comes to success rates. It's not about running more, just run good when you do run. The rest will take care of itself.
And I would flip the question from Scott. I agree. You want the running back that can win one-on-one in the second level, but sometimes you want the running back to win when things aren't blocked well, when someone misses a block or the defense is +1, and you got to have that running back to make that play. And so I know that obviously it's popular and understandable the running backs aren't important in the first round, but I always worry about the overcorrection and say, well, they're not important at all, because they certainly can be. And certainly the Steelers, in part of upgrading that run game, includes upgrading the running back position. All right, so good discussion there on Naji Harris. I want to flip to the defensive side of the football because we focus so much on offense, and rightfully so, but I think we've kind of forgotten about, just Steeler fans collectively, some of the defensive needs for this team. I know you guys have touched on it, and I think, and my guess is, the first position defensively they're going to address is outside linebacker, because there is nothing behind TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith right now. So, Tom, I know you mentioned some edge rushers earlier, Tryon, Bradley King. You can kind of expand on those guys, but any other pass rushers you think would fit well in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned those two. I think someone also mentioned Ellerson Smith from Northern Iowa. Watching him, he's got really good length, and he was the only guy that gave Dylan Radins any trouble in the games I watched. So, he was able to play against good competition there and step up. Trying to think if we have had any others. Yeah, I said Joe Tryon. He fits what the Steelers look for.
What's the best part of Tryon's game? Because obviously he was one of those opt-outs in 2020. No, he didn't get a chance to play this season.
Yeah, he's got good burst. He gets off the line quick. He's got very active hands. He's got a good plan. He attacks it in different ways. They used him in some coverage a little bit here and there, and he can set the edge. He's missing that whole year is a problem, but he has all the tools that can, make him an important backup for the two starters. Now, you mentioned that edge is probably going to be one of the first defensive positions taken, but with two starters entrenched, is that really? I think inside linebacker might even be a little bit more important with only one guy being under contract next year.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I just think at inside linebacker, you bring back Vince Williams, you have Spillane, even still UG3 Marcus Allen, who's going to get a full year to adjust to the new position. I mean, if you ever lost Highsmith or Watt the way you lost Dupree last year, I mean, you would be just devastated. And even just general rotational depth, playing 15, 20 snaps a game. I mean, if they had added somebody to the position, or even had still, say, Anthony Chicklow there, maybe it lessens the need some, but I don't know. If you're counting on a 4th or 5th round guy to be your number 3, I think that's a pretty big ask out of the gate here in 2021.
Okay, yeah, I get that. And another guy was a late round guy was Taryn Jackson out of Coastal Carolina. He's another guy with the size that they look for. He was good against the run. He's got heavy hands. He's got a really good motor. He diagnoses the zone schemes better than gap schemes, but that's something he can learn playing behind the other guys. So if they did wait late, I think Bradley King or Taryn Jackson would be two guys they could look at.
Yeah, and the Steelers had his pro day. Dan Rooney Jr. was there, which is always important for those smaller schools. Josh, same question. Any other edge rushers, early or late, somewhere in the middle that appeal to you?
Yeah,
anybody got any thoughts on Shaka Toney as well, too, as we go through this?
I don't. If someone wants to jump in there, they can.
I can. I actually profiled Shaka. So he was a guy that obviously played behind dudes like Jason Owe, who's getting a lot of attention as a potential first or second round player, and also Yitor Gross Matos, who was drafted last year in the second round. So he was always kind of like the second fiddle considered to them, but he always posted better production than both those players had as a starter. He is your definition of a speed rusher off the edge, a little bit lighter in the pants, riding around that 6'2", 240 range. So he's more of your designated pass rusher at this point in time, but just the speed at which he comes off out on the edge and is able to challenge tackles on their outside shoulder. I mean, he's right at the tackle, like off the snap. His snap anticipation is very, very good. He does need to be able to sync better against the run, which is where Pittsburgh may have some qualms about him as a mid or a mid-late round pick. But, I mean, what you get in the NFL, you get paid to get sacks. He can do that for you. He can fill in for Highsmith or Watt for a few plays as he looks to try and fill out his frame and build his body more in an NFL strength conditioning department. And also he does offer a lot of special teams ability, having blocked several kicks and has several blocked field goals to his name over his years at Penn State.
And he also checked every box under what they look for category, for whatever that is worth as well. Josh, any other edge rushers that you like?
Yeah, the one guy I keep coming back to, and I can't remember who was at the Kentucky Pro Day, but it's Jamar Watson. 3-4 outside linebacker, get off the edge, can drop into coverage. He just made plays every time I watched him, and that feels like a guy 6th round, 7th round, maybe not your ideal number 3 at that point, but he certainly has the traits. The other
Didn't
guy,
he test poorly though? Didn't Watson have a tougher pro day?
Yeah, and yes and no. Obviously, you have to take into account, but I didn't see a poor athlete or someone that struggled to turn the corner on tape. So when a guy tests poorly like that, you obviously have to go back. I'm doing that right now with Chris Evans from Michigan. The running back profile went up the other day, but his numbers were through the roof. But the other guy is Patrick Jones II from Pitt. I know some people have said, oh, that's a second, third round guy. I kind of see a day 3 guy, and I would assume the Steelers have as much background as they need on him being a Pitt guy. Those are the 2 guys I'm kind of keeping a name on or an eye on there from the edge position right now.
Tyler, I saw you shaking your head and mentioning Jones. Any thoughts on him or any other edge guys in this class?
Yeah, Patrick Jones is a guy. I mean, I watch like pretty much every Pitt game, so a little bit of a homer there, but at the same time, he definitely has a great first step. He jumped off the page compared to his counterpart Rashad Weaver. To me, he definitely fits that. He always had his hand in the dirt, I'll say. But I mean, I feel like Pitt has had numerous guys, including like Jabal Shear, to have come from the same scheme, have transferred to be great 3-4 linebackers outside linebackers in the league. So, I mean, I see that. And he, like I said, he has great production. I believe he had, I want to say like 9 sacks this year and then 8 or 9 in the year before that even. So he knows to get to the QB. He has some good counters. Definitely probably could use to get stronger because I think speed right now is kind of his main thing. But he had a decent Senior Bowl too. And I know he talked to the Steelers there. So, definitely a guy to see there probably day 2, early day 3 for the Steelers.
Oh, and I wanted to ask you the conversation Tom and I were having a moment ago about the need at edge. How urgent do you think that need is, and how early would you address it in this draft?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. I mean, you look at it, they traditionally play their third edge rusher, 15 to like 20 snaps a game. So that's not going to be light snaps. And I think last year, you saw Highsmith was pretty good at it, but once Dupree went down, then you start relying on guys like Cassius Marsh, Ola Daney, and the run defense kind of falls apart. So I think it's a pretty big need. I'd put it right up there with corner at what I think are the top needs defensively. And I think you could definitely see it in the first 3 rounds of the draft. I mean, I've heard. I can't say I've gone too deep into this year's edge class, been more focused on defensive backs, but I would agree that Taryn Jackson was a guy who definitely caught my eye. Watched a couple Coastal Carolina games, specifically the BYU game. The guy was all over the field in Zach Wilson's face every play. So I think maybe if you're looking on a later round guy, it's also potentially a position they could double dip at. Mm-hmm. I think we'll see. But I think, top 3 rounds would be a safe bet for it, but we'll see.
Dave, you're the edge guy.
Taryn Jackson, who did the profile on him, and what's the one game that I must see of Taryn Jackson?
I did the profile. Let me see who I watched. BYU was definitely one game, and the game against Louisiana he played pretty well as well.
Was that versus Christensen at all? Do we know how much he beat Christensen, or was it the right tackle? More, do you know, Tom?
I believe he plays on both sides. So
okay.
Yeah,
I think definitely. If I remember correctly, he had about 12 reps against Christensen. So, yeah, and I mean it was a great battle. So that's one to definitely go back and watch, guys.
Dave, I was going to ask you, again, you're the edge guy here. What guys are you banging the gavel for at the position?
Yeah, and unfortunately, the time constraints and all, you got to pick and choose when you go through some of this. So I haven't gone as deep as I've wanted to with this. Look, the need's there, right? I mean, you look at the depth chart right now, and Cassius Marsh. There's no way they can go into the season with him being the number 3 behind Highsmith. Also, on top of it, you could probably make a good argument for the for Aziz Ojulari, at 24th overall. But I think that would be look, he checks a lot of boxes, obviously, Tomlin there and all like that. But if you don't get him, and this even assumes he falls down to 24, if you don't get him there, you're not going to get him. So I think what you're going to see at some point from, I don't know, round 3 to round 7, them get one. I think it's going to be one of these all-star game kids on top of it. I think Tom's already named off a couple of those guys there, talking about Bradley King. I haven't watched anything on the Coastal Carolina kid. That's why I want to know from Tom. I have watched a little bit of Patrick Jones, a possibility there, and I have not got around to the Florida State kid either. Now I have watched Tony. I put him in my mock draft. I think if you waited longer into the draft, he could be an option. I really think they like Ellerson Smith, but much like Tony, I think he's more of a guy that's going to try to beat you first off of the edge, and then you're probably going to be a little suspect initially at the NFL level against the run there as well too. Now the only other name that I have circled here is Hamilcar out of Oregon State. Is a very interesting prospect. You worry about that bend with him, though. I think his ability to turn the corner, then some of that production drop off. The most intriguing of the bunch, and I'm going to kind of throw it back to why is this guy in kind of the middle of the road here? Is I think Ronnie Perkins, because there's some snaps, some Oklahoma snaps where this kid looks like he might be the top edge rusher when it comes to 3-4 outside linebacker types in this draft. But then you turn around and you hear 3rd, 4th round. Who did the profile on him, and where's Ronnie Perkins in all this?
Did anyone do the profile on Perkins?
Yeah, I'll look it up for you.
Maybe that someone's not here. Yeah, does anyone know anything about Perkins?
That was Tevin Jackson that did that.
Tevin Bryant did it.
Okay, gotcha.
That kid today, and those clips impressed the hell out of me.
Who was that?
Jordan Smith at a UAB.
Right. I think he had another poor pro day workout, but a guy to watch. Does anyone know anything about Ronnie Perkins? Because I was compelled to take him on my live walk the mock draft over on YouTube over the weekend. Any thoughts on Perkins from Oklahoma?
Yeah, he's a guy. He has a nasty dip around the bend, around the corner there. Speed to power guy. I did want to bring him up in Gil Brandt's top 100 because he was at 56, and I was kind of like, whoa, that might be a little strong,
right?
Right. He jumped 14 spots in his top 100 there that we just went over.
There's certain aspects of his tape that make you go, man, alive. Why is he hovering around that down so low? Now, I don't know if around top 50 or so is where he belongs here, because we see these edge rushers, these shorter edge rushers over time with these kind of measurables. If they can't play a 4-3 base in, they don't have the length, they get pushed down. right?
Yeah.
And I think he's 6'2.5", 253. I mean, that you want to talk about ideal kind of outside linebacker measurables. Now, unfortunately, with him, I think we were missing the 3-cone time on him, and his maybe he just didn't test well, but his short shuttle was, I think, 4.69, and that's not great. That's what ended up having his RAS score middle of the pack there. The tape does not match the RAS score, I guess. And I view him maybe more as a 3rd round guy. And I'm starting to wonder if he might be the guy in 3rd or 4th round for the Steelers on the edge.
Who was at Oklahoma's pro day, Alex, for the Steelers?
Let me check here. Was it one of the offensive line coaches? Let me look here. It was, assistant offensive line coach Chris Morgan, and somebody else I was not able to identify was there.
Okay. I know one of the big knocks against Perkins is the length and the upper body strength. I mean, there's some clips on tape where he just gets absolutely swallowed up. So maybe that will help him in terms of standing up and rushing off the edge from outside linebacker. But yeah, the tape is pretty darn good, but the testing numbers were kind of like, well, what's going on here? But yeah, I was stunned to see him at 56 in Gil Brandt's top 100 and seeing some of the buzz that he's getting around the rest of the country leading up to the draft. Like PFF has him as a 2nd round pick, which is
wow.
Yeah, it's like what am I missing here? But
I like the Florida State kids. I think they're interesting. Janarius Robinson and Joshua Kando. Production wasn't big for both of those guys, especially Kando. Kando's the better athlete overall, but Robinson played as a base end. He plays an outside linebacker, off ball, displacing the line of scrimmage. He moved around quite a bit. Just a really strong, long, leverage guy with seemingly good character. I think that fits Pittsburgh round 3 or round 4.
Kando,
I also watched Chris Rump over the weekend, and I didn't see it. I didn't see it with him.
Alex, I profiled Kando, and there's a clip from 2019 against Boise State. It's against Ezra Cleveland, who ended up, I think he was a 1st round pick by the Vikings. Kando's 6'7" and somehow dipped underneath Ezra Cleveland, who's smaller than Kando. But yeah, you mentioned the production's just not there, but the traits are. And you just wonder if it was his usage or his coaching, because he was a former 5-star prospect. He's 6'7". I don't remember exactly what his wingspan was, but he's just a massive dude that moves so well. So he's one to watch there.
Yeah, it's just difficult to find a name. The Steelers need an edge rusher, but his edge class is not great overall. There's some interesting guys, but there isn't any kind of standout top to bottom, really, I think, in this class. So, Dave, any other questions? Those were kind of all the questions I had. I wanted to ask you guys anything else you wanted to throw out to the Depot crew, Dave?
Let's see here. The safety class. One question I want to ask: if you had your druthers of the type of wide receiver that just look, you get through the depth chart, looks pretty good until you get to Ray McCloud. He is cuttable. Let's admit it. I don't think you could go into or go into this draft thinking we are good to go. Because I think they could still potentially add a wide receiver in this draft. I don't think it's going to be early. I think it could be later than early. And please, Lord, do not let it be Schwartz, because I have a feeling they like that kid. If you guys had your druthers, what kind of receiver are you looking for in this draft? Or if you're the Steelers, are you looking for a Z? Because look, James Washington's contract is up after the end of this year, and he's predominantly kind of been your Z. Are you looking more of look, Deontay Johnson's got a couple years left. He's primarily your X right now, your guy, and then obviously you got guys in Juju and Claypool who can both play in the slot and move on the outside there. And then you got kind of a gadget guy, if you will, I guess in McLeod, someone that you're probably not going to line up on the outside too much, and really you're probably not going to throw in the football more than 5 yards down the field. At least they didn't last year in that offense. What are you guys looking for in a wide receiver for the Steelers, and throw us some names there?
All right. I'll answer this question for you, Dave. So when I've probably evaluated 10 to 12 receivers so far for Steelers Depot, and The ones that kind of been sticking out to me the most are kind of that Z, that big body down the field type that could replace James Washington. Just because.
God bless you, because I get so much pushback when I holler out Z. Go ahead.
No, because like they brought back Juju Smith-Schuster, and you've got to imagine that, you know, they brought him back obviously for this year, but, you know, with the intention to possibly re-sign him long term to play that big slot role over the middle and be that route runner. With the Z receiver down the field, you just look at the type of guys that they have. And the one thing that we criticize Chase Claypool with is the ability to stack corners and be able to challenge vertically. And obviously James Washington's kind of the guy that does that for us, but he isn't the fastest receiver. And likewise, he isn't the tallest or the biggest receiver that we have. So you look for a receiver that can complement what we already have and kind of build that basketball team of a 1 through 5 where we can have a bunch of different skill sets. A Z would be really good. We've all talked about Tamori and Terry being that developmental guy that could sit a year, play behind the other 4, develop kind of like what Martavius did coming on late on in the season, and then kind of be this freak of nature guy that can challenge defensive backs vertically. Another guy that I got to watch that I absolutely loved and that has been in contact with the Steelers wide receiver coach Ike Hilliard is a guy by the name of Nico Collins from Michigan.
Great tape.
The guy has phenomenal size. He has a great ability to win vertically, but you also look at some of his Senior Bowl tape. He can run routes intermediate as well too. And much like with Tamori and Terry and other receivers that we've seen, Shea Patterson and other quarterbacks at the University of Michigan could not get it done. They could not get him the ball. And we kind of saw just like what he could do in his final season as a junior at Michigan before he opted out of the season. And he's just this guy that is going to be a better pro than he was as a college player, as he can take the top off the defense, but he also has the ability to work the intermediates as well too. And you kind of get this Allen Robinson vibe from him. And Allen Robinson went in the late second round, and you can kind of look at the league and say, you know, he could possibly be that top 10, top 12 receiver. And Nico Collins could fit in that same role, being pushed down because he missed a year. Obviously, we don't know where the Steelers will sit on top of that in terms of, okay, did they miss a year? Did they play now? But he's this developmental receiver. He has all the traits. He kind of fits what they need. It would be interesting to see. I mean, depends if they want to take him third round, if he would be there. But he's a guy that I love, and I have circled that if he was there, I wouldn't be mad with the pick one bit.
I think it's definitely a Z as well. That guy that's down the field, can make plays. You know, again, that's Tamori and Terry. The one guy I want to throw out, and I may butcher his name, so I apologize, but it's Josh Imatorbhebhe from Illinois. That was a complete mouthful. So, but I mean, that guy, physical freak, really good contested catch guy. I think his vertical was 46 inches, I believe. You know, he's just a freak, but he never played in a system that kind of took advantage of his abilities. He transferred from USC as a 4-star to Illinois. You know, so he's a guy, day 3, round 6, round 7, the Steelers could grab. The one guy I kind of have circled, though, can wear many hats is Oklahoma State's Dylan Stoner. He can play in the slot, he can play in the boundary. He's not going to win downfield consistently as a Z, but, you know, slot boundary guy, he's just tough, makes a ton of tough catches, and he can return punts. So I think that's an option there on special teams.
It felt like he'd been at Oklahoma State for like 7 years.
Yeah, I had to check. I'm like, are we sure he's a redshirt senior? It feels like he's been there since 2010.
I really think because I remember I broke down every throw that Mason Rudolph did during his entire career. And even back then, he's all over the tape back then. And it feels like that's been 5 years ago now.
Right. Yeah, he's just a lot of fun. Just your classic underrated slot receiver that can definitely play on the boundary and just super tough, smart football player.
Yeah. I'm sorry. You can go on.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. No, I was just going to say, taking it a little bit of a different direction. I think even though Juju's still on the team, I consider him more of like a big slot, kind of uses his like physical body for second level releases and whatnot. I would look a little more, we were talking about it earlier in the draft season, of maybe that like slot yak guy, where especially in this Canada offense, the only guy on the team where I really look at him as super dynamic with the ball in his hands would be Deontay Johnson, and he's your X receiver. So I think maybe if you could get a guy sort of as we were talking about, in like that gadget mold, but a little bit more receiving chops than Ray McLeod. I look at maybe a guy like Amari Rodgers from Clemson, definitely sticks out to me. Just somebody who's talented with the ball in his hand. I guess Kadarius Toney from Florida would be another one, but just guys that I think can really give this team some juice with the ball in their hand, because that's kind of seems to be lacking sometimes.
Yeah, so one guy I wanted to break down too was Jonathan. I think you did the draft profile on him, was Trevon Grimes from Florida, and he was a guy that I only knew because it was something came up about him meeting with the Steelers, and started diving in his game. And I think one of the first or second plays I saw was him going up and getting a deep pass over Patrick Surtain, and it was like just made you just jump out of your chair and say, "Wow!" I mean, he's a guy that definitely plays above the rim. Can definitely stretch the field. He also, he can block and also play. I think you wrote he also played some gunner as well. So again, it kind of falls under that Tamori and Terry type basket there, where you can maybe develop in your Z, but also can be that fifth or sixth receiver on your roster as well.
No, I definitely love Trevon Grimes. I got the opportunity to obviously work with him when I was at Florida in 2018, and he was just kind of coming into himself. He was transferring from Ohio State at the time, and he's really developed under Coach Mullen and Coach Savage's tutelage there, and has really become a very good, well-rounded player who is very giving of the team. Like, you'll see him cover kicks and punts, and that's something that, if he's there in the 5th, 6th round, or the 6th, 7th round, much like I'm pretty sure Alex included him in his mock draft as a player that could possibly take Chase Claypool if he has an expanded role on offense off of special teams units and contribute in that way, as well as being able to, he's not afraid to be a blocker. He is very good in terms of working deep and also on the intermediate, just using his body. He uses his body very well to go up and get a rebound on the basketball hoop. He's just that way. Obviously, his deep speed isn't the greatest, and he does need a little bit nuance with his route running and coming out of his breaks a little bit quicker. But when seeing him there, obviously I've seen Kadarius Toney work live and in action, but it was just one of those things where it's okay, if Trevon Grimes, if he gets this, he could be a very, very good pro, much like Nico Collins, where he could be a better professionally when he was a college player.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys both mentioned him. I think Grimes is a great fit, and I think the point you make about special teams value is so important, because once we get into the day 3 guys, we can talk about what they do as receivers, but they got to cut their teeth on special teams. Hines Ward began his career not as a receiver, but as a special teamer. And in a crowded receiver room where you're not going to get to really play on offense year one because all the guys are here, you're going to have to make your impact somewhere else. And so Chase Claypool, what attracted Pittsburgh to him was the receiver aspect, of course, but Tomlin Colbert said at the Senior Bowl, those gunner drills, how hard he worked at those, how good he was at those, and of course what he did at Notre Dame, a 4-year guy as a gunner. I think Grimes would be a great pick with a 6th or 7th round selection.
The one guy I want to throw in there with special teams capabilities is Simi Fehoko from Stanford. That's a developmental guy. He has significant drop issues, but man, he tested through the roof. He has some good tape. He's a legitimate deep threat, and he played special teams the last 3 years. He was a gunner, kick coverage guy at Stanford. Just a terrific athlete. I think that could be a flyer late on day 3 that you can kind of sit for a year or two and really develop, because the athleticism and the overall traits are there. Just not much production.
Just as a last question to kind of wrap things up here, and again, thank you guys so much for being here. I think this was an absolutely fantastic discussion. Any
I'm
players?
blown away. I want to do 2 more hours.
Don't tempt them. Any guy at a position we haven't discussed much that you think is worth mentioning, whether that's inside linebacker. We didn't talk a ton about the quarterbacks, but just any guy you feel like we should be, would be worth mentioning here before we wrap up the show.
I have 2 at linebacker. Derek Barnes from Purdue and Isaiah McDuffie from Boston College. I just watched McDuffie Sunday night. Man, is he just a terrific athlete inside. But Barnes is the guy that I kind of came on to late in the process, and I can't take my eyes off of him. Just a great athlete, really good against the run, and if I remember correctly, the Steelers are showing interest. I think he could be a legitimate guy behind Devin Bush or Vince Williams and Robert Spillane that you could really just develop and have a really good 3-down linebacker in the future.
Yeah, I saw Jerry Olszewski's very blurry face at Purdue's Pro Day, so he was there. Jonathan, who did you want to mention?
Yeah, I was just going to quick mention on Josh's comment that I did the profile in Barnes, and we're having the conversation on JOK of whether or not he could be this box linebacker. Barnes has that size. He's also played a lot on the edge. He has a special teams value. He definitely fits that mold of what the Steelers possibly could be looking for as a buck linebacker. But the guy that I like and that was already profiled, I am a big fan of Kerry Vincent Jr. out of LSU, opted out of the season. He is a world-class track guy, having been participated, obviously, at the national level in high school, as well as helping win, I believe it was the indoor SEC and national championship for LSU. Just his overall speed, how it translates to the field, is very impressive. Obviously, he had about 4 or 5 interceptions in his the championship run with the Tigers before he opted out. But his willingness to come down and hit you is very impressive as well, too. He's just this guy that you can put in the slot. Obviously, he needs to be able to read breaks out of coverage a little bit better, which was profiled well by one of our guys here. But I think that he's that guy that is being pushed in the 4th, 5th round because he didn't play. But I would argue that, he's a mid to late day 2 selection. And if he's there as a 4th round option for the Steelers, he would be a great pick to fill that slot role at the nickel.
I feel a little bit of validation there because he was kind of my later round slot guy there. I saw a lot of the same things, and I think he'll get pushed down a little bit for the sheer fact for several reasons that you mentioned in addition to him opted out. But he does have, I don't think his dad, I don't think the football bloodline's there, but I think it's more of a professional and not so much NFL. But there is some bloodline there on top of it there, and I thought he'd be because of that speed and all. He just has all the kind of the traits. He's got that little bit of that. He's not afraid to stick the fan in the face in the fan either, and the Steelers love those types on top of it there. So interesting that you brought him up.
Yeah, the one guy too. Sorry, Alex.
No, go ahead, Josh.
Scott, you and I had talked about in the comments was Michigan's Ambry Thomas, that kind of guy who opted out of the season, but a physical guy, can play slot, can play boundary. I'm sure the Steelers could get all the background information they need on him being a Michigan man. That's one corner I think I've had in both mocks at this point in that 4th round. I think Scott's kind of in the same spot as me.
And Sean Wade, of course.
Yeah.
I'll stand on the table for my guy. And the linebacker, who's doing Buddy Johnson? Because he and Isaiah McDuffie, when I was reading up on them, they both seem to be that kind of pop. They're a little small, but they apparently they're just all of it. They're the little Jack Russell Terrier linebackers.
Scott, and when people read your big board on Tuesday, any other names that they should pay special attention to?
Well, other than Sean
Wade.
Other than Sean Wade, no. The best thing to do with the big board is look for the patterns. Where I think like with the corners, there's some really, really good round 2 corners like Ahsante Samuel Jr., but there's a big cluster of them in that round 4 range. So, Kerry Vincent, Ambry Thomas, there's a bunch of guys. So if you're bargain shopping, that's the range to do it. The other thing, the thing that confuses me the most with this is how big a discount is there going to be for the small school player. Wouldn't surprise me if Quinn Miners, and Dave, I'm as on Quinn Miners as you are, okay? I love the story. I love everything. But I can see him going in round 4.
People get mad at me. People get mad at me for saying that, but I get it. I love the kid. I mean, I get every aspect of it, but there is some aspect of him that you got to say, hold your horses here. And small school, not playing last year. Yeah, he showed up at the Senior Bowl. Fantastic. I was glad to see it. You look at his tape, but this is also a guy that's going to possibly be moving over to center at the NFL level as well, too. And even though he fits in there, he doesn't have experience at it. So unless you love him and you're going to play him at left guard, that's the only way I think you have the reason to take him in at least the first 64 picks there.
Yeah, I agree 100% because if you turn around and say, well, if it was my actual money that I was putting on the line, I'm not sure I want to put it on the kid who's never played the position, who's taken snaps in a good, D3 program. But you just haven't seen him anywhere except the Senior Bowl looking legitimate against NFL athletes. And I would just be scared to death if it was my actual out-of-pocket money on the line.
All right, Alex, roll through these other guys. Alex, our other guys here, and let them rattle off a few guys.
Sure. Tyler, any other guys worth mentioning here?
Yeah, so the one guy I think that checks a ton of boxes is Baron Browning from Ohio State. Mm-hmm. He obviously, super athletic. I think he has one of the highest, RAS scores probably in the entire draft. So I did hit my profile on him. And I mean, he had his best year, actually, his junior year was when he actually was the legitimate middle linebacker for Ohio State. His senior year, he was moved to more of an overhang player. I don't know, they wanted to get Tef Borland on the field, evidently, but he was super athletic. He moves so well for his size. And then he also has he can move well, but he can also smack you in the mouth too. He has some crazy hits on film. And then he also has some rushing off the edge. I don't think that's not going to be his game, probably, when he goes to the next level. But I mean, when you're talking about getting athletic guys next to Devin Bush in the future, I think he still needs some time to develop, where if you're probably taking him, in the third round, he can play special teams, and then he can play in a pinch, right away. You still have Robert Spillane there. You have Vince Williams there. Now, if they draft him, I mean, that might, change a little bit, but at the same time, I think he would be a great depth piece to be an eventual starter who could be, with next to Devin Bush for years to come.
Daniel, I know you're back. Thanks. I know you had to step out for a second, but glad you're back. We were talking about just kind of final thoughts, any players that we hadn't mentioned. I know you missed the last half hour or so, but just guys that you really like, not necessarily just for Pittsburgh, but just overall in this draft class.
I'll make up for lost time and throw out two of them to piggyback off of Tyler, keep it with the Ohio State linebackers. I'm working on a profile on Justin Hilliard right now. Out of every position in this draft, he is my absolute favorite player in the class, because if he didn't get hurt his first 2 years at Ohio State, he comes in as a top 10 prospect. I think we're talking about him in the first round potentially. But Ohio State doesn't make the national championship without him. He has one of the biggest clutch factors and is always around the ball at the biggest moments of the biggest games, more so than any player I've scouted in this class this year. So I think Justin Hilliard, he's a project because he only has a few games of starting experience his last couple of years with Ohio State. But I think if the Steelers draft him and sit him behind a leader and a mentor like Vince Williams, I think there's starting upside that could be had on late day 3 right there. And then Zach Davidson out of Central Missouri, the tight end, 6'7", runs almost like a receiver, great blocker, and off-the-charts character, leadership ability, and just a desire to get better. I was at the College Gridiron Showcase, and he was clearly the best player there. So I think there's somebody else who you bring him in, you give him some time to learn from Eric Ebron. That's a starter you can get in the 4th round, and you don't have to spend a pick. I know we talked about him. You don't have to spend that second rounder on Pat Freiermuth, because you get Zach Davidson in the 4th. I think your tight end problems are solved for a long time after this year.
And he could also be your punter, I believe.
I was going to say he's listed as a punter. I mean, I wonder if Danny Smith's drooling here.
One of the best punters in Division II last year, and I wouldn't mind seeing him do some kind of gimmick play, send a punt out.
And he was at Missouri's Pro Day, so that was big for him to get to work on that, work out on that big stage. Owen, what kind of sleepers do you see in this defensive back group that you think could be really good value on day 3?
On day 3, I don't know if he falls, and if somebody mentioned him while I was gone, but Benjamin St. Juste from Minnesota, he's got size, he's physical. I loved watching him at the Senior Bowl because he was roughing up people and just bodying up on receivers. When he did it well, he shut every receiver there down, even the fast speed guys like Kadarius Toney. But the issue is he's still raw. He doesn't have a lot of starting experience, and he's going to draw a lot of flags early on with the physical style he uses. So he's going to need to work on that. But there's somebody else who, if he falls to day 3, he's got the makeup and the size that can make him a great corner if he can be a little more disciplined.
Oh, and any others you would throw in that mix?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, just to piggyback off what they were going on earlier. So I actually profiled Kerry Vincent Jr., and just adding a little context, he ran the 100-meter dash 10:07, which was 11th in the nation out of even all just track athletes. Was part of a 4x100 team that set the record. And he's one of the few guys where he legitimately plays to that speed. You see it on the field. He'll play catch technique at 5 yards against some of the fastest receivers in the country, just dare them to run past him, be sitting under everything. And you really just cannot beat him vertically. I'd say he's got to work a little more to get better shedding stock blocks and stuff. He's not the biggest frame guy, but really natural ball skills, good in center field. You can play a variety of roles for you. And then I would agree with him on St. Jude. St. Jude's is an interesting player. I mean, doesn't really track the ball well downfield, like has a lot of times where he's just kind of playing the man, playing late through the hands. So I think he'll have to work on that. But if you're drafting pure measurables, that's a guy. And then finally, I just add one of my favorites, Thomas Graham Jr. out of Oregon, who a lot of people look at him 5'10", maybe not the fastest guy, like 4'8", plays pretty true to his speed, but 76-inch wingspan, 31-inch arms, and he'll really get up in guys and be pretty good with his hand usage. Works a variety of different press looks, pretty good with his offhand jam, pretty good with two-hand, good with the motor press. So he interests me a lot, and I think
he's a good kid too, isn't he? I think Alex and I talked to him. You could see him being a Steeler. He's a good kid too.
Yeah, no, he was a pretty good guy for him. I think they interviewed with him and not Lenore, which is interesting because they were both pretty sought after prospects.
Yeah, Oregon's got a ton of guys. What's that, Scott?
What about your guy Cameron Bynum?
Yeah, I think he's really kind of flying under the radar. I think the comp for him, even a Steven Nelson potential kind of upside. I don't think the length is great, but the size is good overall and just really good tape there on the outside. A really productive player and just kind of flying under the radar. Another guy, too, I just watched yesterday was Tay Gowan from Central Florida. We talk about Aaron Robinson and Richie Grant, but Gowan, I think, had really good tape. Just the problem with him is it's a really small sample size. 9 career starts, did not play in 2020. Just a 1-year starter, transferred from community college, started his college career at Miami, Ohio. So there just isn't a lot of tape there. But I think from a kind of size fluidity standpoint, how fluid his hips are for being just about 6'1" with plus ball skills is impressive and worth taking probably there on day 3. Tom, I think I want to get to you as well. Any kind of other sleeper prospects or just guys you like in this class?
Yeah, a couple guys that I like. Chaz Surratt, the linebacker out of North Carolina. He went to school as a quarterback, so he only played linebacker the past 2 years. And he ended up with over 200 tackles and was first-team All-ACC both years. He's got sideline speed. He tackles well. He has the traits to be successful in coverage. He's got room to add some weight, too. He was listed at 227. He's definitely got room to add some size. And he's improving at diagnosing plays, obviously, with being only playing the position for 2 years. And defensive line is not likely a position, but I'm going to throw the name of Liam McNeil out there from North Carolina State. This guy is massively strong. I highlighted a play that had him holding off a double team with his left arm and making a tackle with his right arm. You just can't move him off the spot. He played at 335 last year, which is the team asked him to gain weight to play in the middle, but he usually plays at 315, so that might improve his pass rush a little bit. But I think he's scheme diverse, and he's the guy that can control 2 guys and keep your linebackers clean.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we didn't talk really anything about the defensive line because we don't think they're going to address it. But and it's not a great class in general, but I think Neil's a good name. Where do you think he goes? Is that a 3rd round kind of guy, 2nd round? What do you think?
I have him as a 4th round, like early 4th round. He might sneak into the 3rd, but like you were saying, these defensive linemen, there's no pass rushers in it whatsoever. So, it's all going to be scheme and, who needs someone to just stack the middle there.
Right. All right, guys, I think that's going to basically wrap things up here. Dave, any final thoughts? And again, a big thank you to all you guys, not only for tonight, but for the entire just draft season and past draft seasons. If you've been with us longer, you guys have just been rock stars. And I know Dave and I really, really thank you for all your effort.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my Kleenex here, man. I'm close to having tears streaming down my face here. Unbelievable. I knew this was going to turn out great tonight. It turned out even better than what I thought. I'm so proud of you guys and the work that you have done. Just phenomenal to hear you guys all on this one podcast, just rattling off what you know about these guys. I have learned so much from you. It makes my job easier. I know it makes Alex's job much easier as well, too. After the draft, we're going to have a couple of you guys on a little bit at a time, especially if you did the profile on the guy. This will not be your last time on this show. And once again, the listeners ought to be besides themselves right now, 2 hours into this thing. But I want to let everybody know I am besides myself as well. I think you guys just incredible and putting a punctuation on it tonight with your appearance on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. As Dave said, we'll certainly have some of you guys on kind of more individually based on who they draft after the draft. So again, thank you guys. Be sure to look out for the rest of the crew's draft profiles. We are not done yet, and I believe each of you will be doing a mock draft as well before the 29th, so we can get kind of your final predictions on that. So stay tuned for that. So for Dave Bryan, myself, and the whole Steelers Depot crew, thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.